Yeah, you're asking really good questions. These are the kinds of questions that I wish people would ask. I've never tasted film, but I have put it in a blender.
I'm curious if you have thoughts or an answer as to like where we should, like where we have to call it in terms of what we can realistically think to archive versus what we kind of have to let enter the dustbin of history.
Where I think it smells so bad.
But you said that it is partially made of gelatin. Now that means that film is not vegan, and that is giving me very conflicted feelings right now. And so I'm curious what sort of detective work went into making sure that with reasonable certainty this is the entire film as it was intended to be shown.
I don't know if I can say this either on the thing, but
Hey, so you're about to watch a really incredible interview I did with Oscar Becher over at Vinegar Syndrome, and I just wanted to go ahead and hop on and give this quick disclaimer before we get into it, because there were just an unbelievable and kind of unprecedented amount of technical difficulties that we ran into. The first day, my computer just decided to take a shit and like completely overheat and stop working. I don't know why, but we decided to put a pin in it and pick it up the next day. And then we just had microphone issues for days. And so the sound quality is going to dip a little bit in the second half, and there's going to be some rough video during the first half. So it's going to be a little bit of a mixed bag of various unfortunates, but I feel confident that it won't take away from the quality of the conversation and that this is still really valuable and something worth watching. So yeah, thank you again to Oscar for his time, and enjoy the video. Okay, good evening everyone. My name is Celeste La Cabra. Welcome back to the channel. With me here today is an extremely special guest. We have Oscar Becher. I pronounced that right, yes? Okay, from Vinegar Syndrome.
Yeah,
pretty close. So how would you pronounce it?
It's pronounced. I mean, I pronounce it in a dumb way. I pronounce it Becher because like when I was a kid, I had a very bad lisp, so I didn't want to say Becher, which is now I can say it, but I still say Becher. Yeah.
Okay, well then we'll say Becher. Oscar Becher from Vinegar
Cool.
Syndrome.
Becher.
All right. Okay, we're gonna dive into a lot of nerdy stuff about film preservation and restoration. We're gonna get into this chunky little box that I have with me here and do a bit of a deep dive into that. But before we get started, if you are at all interested in in-depth discussions on cult and art house films, please go ahead and hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, leave us lovely comments to read, and share this with somebody who might find it valuable. And if you'd like to support the work I do monetarily, there are links in the description for my Patreon page, channel membership programs, etc. So, with all that kind of cynical plugging out of the way, let's go ahead and get started here. So Oscar, could you kind of briefly tell us about what Vinegar Syndrome, the company, not the unfortunate degradation process that it's named after, is, and what your job title and like responsibilities are over there?
Yeah. So thank you for bringing up the deterioration. It must be said. Every single day I go to work, I think about that. Yeah. So Vinegar Syndrome is you have to. It's part of the name. It's in the name. It's in the name. If we didn't have an archive, there would be someone being like, "What are you doing to stop Vinegar Syndrome?" But yeah, the company is a distribution company founded in the early 2010s. Weird quadruple of weird people, all with their own areas of expertise, who kind of wanted to build out a film archive and a distribution restoration company. And all of the releases kind of came from the post-mid 50s. So everything post-nitrate era, nitrate explodes, vinegar film, triacetate film, decays, becomes acidic. So built into our nature is this film preservation mindset where we try to bring people the best versions of films, which they wouldn't really think automatically warrants the deluxe treatment. But we think they actually really benefit from actually having a lot of work and effort and emphasis put on trying to get the best colors, the proper aspect ratio, as close to as possible to how it was originally seen. So yeah, that's kind of what Vinegar Syndrome is. And it's also my we're just dealing with all the crazy people here because everybody's just obsessed with film and in different facets of film. Some people are obsessed with shooting, making documentaries. And I have my own weird niche area of the company where I manage the film archive as the now I guess technically I'm a film archive director. But as vault manager, I basically ensured the workflows to make sure that something is brought in and placed in that can. Seems very simple. Take a reel out, put it in a can. There's a lot of very intricate details there, which could possibly lead to a film getting lost. And our whole nature, our whole mission is to stop films from becoming lost. And as an archivist, I make sure it's safe enough to actually go through the scanner. So, and there's a lot more, researching and this kind of stuff. But yeah, my favorite part is digging through stuff and trying to find cool things. But yeah. That's
Right
kind
on.
of that's kind of the gist of it.
So I think a lot of people probably think that your job is in the actual restoration process, but I think what you're telling me is that it's more about like getting everything together in an actual archive, organized, labeled, marked, checked, QC'd in sort of a preliminary stage before it actually gets to the scanner. Am I understanding that correctly?
You're absolutely understanding it right, and but also afterwards too. Everything
Oh,
can
yeah.
get lost afterwards. We have a crazy amount of film which is here temporarily too, which I think currently in the sorry, I don't mean to, but we have probably maybe close to 1,000 reels of unowned materials here in this room,
Mm.
where basically I have to make sure that it can't be canned, can't be like fiddled with. It has to go back in the same cans, which are often terrible. So half of it is caring for the long-term materials, which are in there. But yeah, we have an amazing like restoration team, which is in right over there. If you look maybe 25 feet yonder, where we basically have 3 of the best restoration people ever. And one of the owners is a restoration. He kind of grew up in grading and restoration. So, it's kind of like everybody always does think that. They always think that I'm going through tapping dust. I like to think that I make their life like I can cut down time that they spend on something. It oftentimes happens where there'll be a tape across multiple pieces of frames. And of course they could use software to kind of like clone it and remove it, but oftentimes they'll just say, can you jump in? That was missed on the initial inspection. And I'll jump in there. So yeah, it is very preliminary, but also it's caring for the film and making sure that we decrease the amount of temperature, because in the heat up here it gets really hot. And we have shitty concrete walls, and it's a nightmare. So I basically have to use every single piece of budget and funding that I have to make sure that the film, which is in these breathable cans, gets the best type of air. So yeah, I'm not clicking through. We have really great people who do that, and they're much better than me at that kind of stuff. So it's good that they're doing it and not me.
Quick clarifying question. You said that like if there's a piece of tape across a couple things and they ask you to take care of that, do you mean just like you then actually physically remove that tape and make sure that there's no residue left over? Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, no, sorry, I've never been in an interview where someone said residue, which is yes, my entire job deals with making residue and like the nonsense that some like person who's cutting the film 20 years ago didn't really care about the type of tape. Every single original negative is not this pristine thing. Everything is going to kind of have multiple, every single time it's distributed, if they go back to that original negative, someone's going to break the film or a splice is going to tear. And so it's not always the easiest thing to just go back to the earlier elements. Every single time you pull from a film element, it's really difficult. Sometimes it's just putting it on and running it through the scanner. But like one current project, which is being announced like maybe next month, like literally every edit had, not only did they re-edited for the video era, so basically they cut it into different sections, multiple reels, threw it in a trash bag. That was the original filmmaker itself doing this, and then I had to piece it together in order these 3 different reels, and then also on every single frame, remove the tape splices that went over 3 to 4 frames. So that took like 60 hours, 60
Oof.
millimeters. So it's like, yeah, lots of residue. Thank you for saying the word residue in this interview.
Well, maybe, I don't know, like, maybe it's because I'm neurodivergent, let's call it that. But like, when I'm removing stickers from things, they'd always leave something, like tape, anything
Yeah,
sticky,
yeah,
and Goo Gone is my best friend. But I don't
yeah.
imagine that you're spraying Goo Gone on a 30-year-old piece of film. Maybe I'm wrong, but I doubt it.
It's very controversial topic in archiving. I'm
Uh-huh.
sorry, I'm not going to go so crazy for this, but I
No,
think
that's okay.
the use of Kukan is definitely a contentious topic. I have a friend who's an archivist who loves, like, is the biggest, like, Kukan it away.
I
And
mean,
whereas it works, yeah,
it
it
works pretty
works,
good, you know?
yeah. But like, I did a director's cut thing where
Uh-huh.
I had to scan every single outtake.
Mhm.
And basically, the question was how to remove the splices so that you couldn't see any of it because they needed the half frames as well. And the question was to use Goo Gone. They told me to use Goo Gone. I was like, no, I'm going to figure out a better way. But I found the best way, and this is very sacrilegious to my field, was light use of a hairdryer.
Oh,
Heat,
okay.
not good for film, but like speeding up the actual chemical process of the adhesive
Mhm.
allowed it to come off almost nothing left over in terms of
Wow.
our favorite word, residue. Yeah. Uh, but
I'm gonna put that somewhere in the thumbnail or something. The residue talk, maybe. I don't know.
yes.
Well, we're big on sacrilegious around here, so you're
Good.
in
Great.
safe hands with that.
Fuck yeah.
um,
Fuck yeah.
so I have another question about the tape thing, just because I think that this is all very interesting. When you then remove the tape, because presumably the tape is there because things needed to be put together, right? Are you then retaping it in a way that is more conducive to the scanner? Or is it just like sometimes there's tape and shit on stuff and you just kind of like get rid of it and say
Yeah.
Godspeed?
I mean, oh, yeah, you're asking a really good question. These are the kinds of questions that I wish people would ask. Where basically, because this is what my brain thinks about. Because I'm trying to be a problem solver, and I try
Uh-huh.
to think of the best ways, archival ways of doing things, the best ways, and the ways to kind of, because we run on a really tight schedule here. But
Mm-hmm.
yes, we have to, with one of our scanners, which is sprocketless, we
Mm-hmm.
can remove certain types of adhesive cause the speed up of vinegar, and I try to
Mm-hmm.
remove those, and still on our sprocketless it can still go through no issue. But on our RE scan or laser graphics directory, basically we literally have to resplice it, and with this very chemically inert type of splicing tape, which is so it's a silicone adhesive, uh, acrylic, a little bit of silicone and acrylic, and basically it's the same actual type of tape that's used to take off fingerprints at crime scenes.
Oh, okay.
So basically, because they need to capture, it's like that's a form of like image too, where they're literally capturing. Uh, it has to be inert. It has to be a plastic, so that like you capture all the oils every single bit, and it doesn't change over time. Because if you had something which is an acidic tape, that over time that fingerprint would change chemically and could alter. So
Hmm.
it's the same kind of material, but over the course of the history of all this stuff, that's not what the actual connecting is done. It's done through cement splicing, but
Hmm.
oftentimes it's because it's a chemical solvent, it breaks off over time. So some OCNs like that one, which was technically a color reversal intermediate, or not color reversal, reversal original, all spliced together. That everything just came apart because it's
Hmm.
just a chemical solvent. Everything breaks down, especially things which are like adhesives and yeah. So yeah. So everything kind of has like a limited duration, and half of it is like, it depends, form fitted. You know, that one, I think that was another person's film. That one with the tape example where it was across a few frames, very visible, like painters not masking tape. But basically, it went over an edit, so you couldn't clone from the frame before. I don't know, I'm using like restoration terms, but cloning is when you take it from a frame before or after. They couldn't take it from the frame before, so basically they're just like, this is such a big. It's funny when you wind through an entire like 20 minutes of film just to find one piece of tape that's fucking up, like probably like a $40,000-$50,000 restoration, and you're like, that saves like a crazy amount of possible ramifications of fucking it up digitally and like relying on software to make the right decision. So
There's that kind of meme.
yeah.
I don't know how relevant this is anymore. I used to see it all the time where there's just like a dad meme shared around. It's like, oh, all you need is duct tape to fix anything. I feel like that's not standard operating procedure around there, huh?
Oh fuck no! I loathe duct tape. I think I have different classifications of the types of tape that I don't like. Duct tape is really high up there. There's also electrical tape. Electrical tape is terrible. They oftentimes put it over large swaths of they'd be cheap. There's duping tape. Sorry, blooping tape. Blooping. I'm so sorry. I'm gonna go granular here, but there's blooping because I never get to talk about tape. But there's blooping tape which covers certain types of the soundtrack. But basically they would like stretch out a crazy amount, cut it thin, and then they'd put it over it, and then you cannot get that stuff off. You literally do have to use glue gun, or goo gun, and old masking tape is terrible because it just breaks apart. I think anything which is white tape, which is on an acetate base, terrible. That'll cause vinegar, because it's creating micro pockets of chemical reactions, which will speed up, especially when exposed to like air. So I hate anything which is like bright whites. Like think of like Skittles, like how they found it has titanium dioxide. Same thing with this type of adhesive, where it's literally, if you find old tape like this, it's disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting. Yeah.
So I have like, I don't know how unique this theory is, but I have this little theory that like every time you start a new job, there's going to be some kind of extremely hyper-specific thing that is going to be the bane of your existence that nobody else would understand. And I feel like we've just arrived at yours, which is tape, or at least very specific kinds of tape. So that's fun.
That is literally it. I've written papers about tape. Literally, it's a nightmare. But I now can like, my party trick, which is a terrible party trick, is if you give me a piece of tape, I can tell you what type of adhesive it is. I'm pretty, that's definitely the coolest, not cool thing ever. Yes, tape. No like it. Yeah.
So I have another question that is not on my little script here, and maybe we'll arrive at it eventually, but I think it's also nice to just let conversations flow organically. I'm curious, do you have because I think you have a degree in archiving, correct?
Technically speaking, yeah, technically I have two. I have I have a certificate where I was trained to be like a film archivist, and recently recently I just graduated. I started this job, and I was unemployed for a very long time, and working in like multiple weird jobs, like a lobster shop and like antique shop and movie store movie theater manager. I was doing all these things at the same time, and I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I need to get into the archiving world. No one was hiring. And I applied to NYU's Moving Image Preservation program, and I just graduated finally in January, which was a whole ordeal.
Well,
So yeah, I did that
congratulations.
throughout thank you very much. Yeah, I did it throughout my whole time as an archivist here, which is
So
yeah.
I'm curious because Is there a lot of like study of chemistry in that sort of degree or that sort of line of work? Because I am notoriously bad at chemistry. In fact, I took one day of it in high school and I like got so terrified and I knew I was so bad at it that I actually got out of ever taking a chemistry class in my life. But when I hear you
Yeah.
talk about some things, I'm like, that feels like it's beyond my pay grade in a very specific way. So I'm curious if there's like a level of chemistry study that goes into this.
I think that the first one is definitely the Selznick, which was the where I was trained to be a film archivist. There's definitely a very like chemistry focused side of it, and
Hmm.
I also in the same way in high school. Like I did biology, um, like I was like, and not because I really like
Hmm.
biology, I was like not very good at chemistry. But I think if now I went back to that class, I would be having the time of my life
Hmm.
because I think when I was trained there and I started handling everything, I think it's when you handle things and when you get to experiment with stuff. Like that's the secret of my job. I just have so much film, and also I have non-archival film that I can experiment with, where basically I can do crazy things with like liter, which is made of nitrate or something like that, you know. So I wasn't the best. I'm now a little bit better, but if like you got me in a room with a chemist, like they
Hmm.
would go circles around me,
Hmm.
someone in material sciences. But I think there should be more of a, in conservation, there is a very strong chemistry focus. Um, but I wish there was more. I genuinely wish there was more. But a lot of us are going at it from arts side. Like I came in
Sure.
because I just watched like way too many movies, and I
Uh-huh.
was just like, how do I do stuff in movies, you know?
Yeah.
And then, yeah, yeah,
That
way too
feels
many
like
movies.
the alternate path. Somewhere in another life, I've tried to do this, and I'm like, hey, I like watching weird shit. Let's do this kind of thing. And I show up to class, and like they've got fucking equations on the board, and I'm just like, hey, I didn't
Right.
sign up for this. This is not okay.
Yeah, I remember when they once described to me how they made like triacetate, and
Uh-huh.
I've tried to memorize the formula so many times,
Hmm.
and I can't do it because it's just like but they also talk about it, the electrons and all this kind of, and I'm just like I'm not there yet. You know, I can
Hmm.
talk about plasticization and like these kinds of things, but here, yeah, I don't know. I'm still learning. I don't know
Hmm.
anything. I don't have a chemistry degree. I just have like a weird, unhealthy fixation with film chemistry, you know, which should
Well,
be a subject. Yeah.
yeah. I was gonna say I don't think it's weird or unhealthy when it's your job, but you know.
True. Yeah. Yeah. I'll remember that next time someone is saying
Yeah.
that. Stop thinking about film.
Yeah, it's literally
Yeah.
your job. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, all right. I think we can move on to the second bullet point on my document here, which is could you tell us a little bit about this little work here, this
Mhm.
tome of sorts that has graced my shelf for some time now?
Yeah. So, the Lost Pictures show is a curated set of 10 lost films and a documentary, where basically, which has a lot of behind the scenes footage and stuff. I like to say every third photo is from my journey starting as an archivist, where a lot of those cutaways are just photos from my, that I took over the course of my nightmare of inheriting backlog. And the first, I'm in order. I'll try to go in order. Red Midnight is this was the last one to be found, which was a 1966 Cape Cod produced movie by an ophthalmologist named James Newslow, who just decided he had the perfect idea for a movie, and the movie makes no sense. He wanted to ensure that he had this weird, it was like a nuclear, I like to say
Hmm.
radio action movie, where basically like it's eh, the beginning of the movie sets the premise that it's about like make sure people aren't too close together, and there otherwise they're fire if a fire goes
Uh-huh.
off, it's going to be go to the next person,
Uh-huh.
which is strangely apt. And so that's probably the last one. Stephen Morowitz found that one upstairs, and because he's going through an enormous collection of backlog materials that his father saved, and
From Distripix, right?
from Distripix.
So that
yeah.
was one of those. Okay.
So that was one of those. Yeah, everyone thinks that since it's Distripix, it's sexploitation only or adult. This movie kind of toes the line. It's more of like an exploitation with a little bit of like sexploitation mixed in. But he's a crazy amount of really unique materials. A lot of arts films, a lot of lost documentaries from the 1970s, which have been what I've liked to get into, if we're ever, if we ever do more. But continuing on through the late 60s, there's Beware the Black Widow, which I also found upstairs. The legendary upstairs, where my nightmare is not over yet. Where basically,
is that just when you say upstairs, is that just like a pile or a room of like unarchived, unsorted through like pallets of film that you discover in like dank catacombs or whatever?
Who have you talked to? Who have you heard this from? Yes, it pretty much is. When I came in, they went in this locked away room, where basically when I first came up here, actually I came down here from Boston, and I went up there, and then the two owners, Ralph and Ryan, basically opened this locked door, and they opened it up, and it was filled like I always call it like the Raiders of the Lost Ark at the end, where it was just piles of film on pallets, and they were just like, "What do you think about all this?" And I was just like, "It's like this is the coolest thing of all time. I'm the one who gets to dig through everything." And they're like, "Well, we don't like coming up here. The last time we came up here was like 5 months ago, and there's ACs up there, luckily, but at the same time, it was like." Yeah, it's just digging through pallets and pallets and pallets. That was one of the 3 pallets which are not owned, but the filmmaker and producer, it's technically just a producer, who owns it, stores it here, and we got his permission to kind of finally can everything and archivally conserve everything, where we put it into the archive, put it into like the cold storage, which is really, really, really stable, and inventory it. And Beware the Black Widow was one of the weird ones where everyone would always say, "Oh, we know where Beware the Black Widow is in this building. It's upstairs." And when I finally went through, I found out that it wasn't actually upstairs. It was like 90% track and 1% picture, original camera negative. And immediately there was like panic, and we contacted him, and luckily he was able to dig out from a storage locker the rest of this movie, which is now on the set. There's also Deep Inside, which is a really cool Joe Sarno movie, which I think is the best drama of the whole thing. Really like very unexpected and very like beautifully directed if you're interested in like looking at people's performances and acting. Beautiful black and white cinematography.
Yeah, the cinematography is really striking on that one.
Stunning. Beautiful. And it came from a Dupneg, which was like normally not known for great picture, but that one was really nice. But there's that one. That one came from FW Murnau Stiftung, where that one and Las Vegas Strangler, aka No Tears for the Damned, which is also a really cool title. And essentially, Las Vegas Strangler was the first one that we were alerted to, and that came to us because of the fact that, someone at FW Murnau Stiftung in Europe, I believe it's Germany or Austria or something. I should know this. It's definitely Germany. But they contacted Brandon here and basically said, we're never going to be able to put this out. Is there any chance that you guys would be able to put it out? And then basically sent it over. And that became like it was a very stressful one too, because when it was sent over, it got lost in transit, partially because it had to get through German customs, which is notoriously rigid, and we had to continuously call to get it out. But that was also a really beautiful one. I'm getting like halfway through. Barbara Barbara was one of my favorites, which unfortunately has a really like disgusting dog scene. I don't know, like very gross, but I think in terms of like, it feels like that was acquired by Joe through the producer contacted, and basically that was the rights and everything. Elements were bought all in one, which was kind of a rarity. Barbara's really cool. And what else? If I can do this by memory, this would be the coolest fucking thing ever. But it's not gonna happen.
Well, real quick, I'm curious. You said
Yes.
it was a Las Vegas Strangler came from the F.W. Murnau collection. Did I hear that right?
Mhm.
That's the Nosferatu guy, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Is there a
Famous for the lost film The Three Devils.
uh-huh?
Yeah.
Is there a reason that was like? Is that just an archive that shares his name, or was there some kind of connection or some kind of reason that those two things ended up being correlated?
So that is one of the most complicated questions about archiving that I only realize now after working in an archive, where basically not only do every archive has like an acquisitions person and a committee kind of. Our committee basically is the owners. But FW Murnau Stiftung, they would basically, when a lab goes defunct or something like that, oftentimes these labs would basically, rather than dumping the material, they'd go to the nearest archive, which had, but at that point, very large warehouses where they hadn't actually, and basically say, would you take this? Rather than throwing it away, would you just take this? And I think in that case, that was that situation. So they had a bunch of materials. They still have a lot, where basically, and they're still processing all these materials, where every archive has that kind of stuff where they're trying to give it to another institution. And luckily we have a good rapport with them, and they know that we like those types of movies. Nice. And they will send us like a title or something like that, because they're not going to share inventories or anything like that. We'll ask if they have this title or this title, by learning whether or not that film was distributed in Germany. So that, I believe, not that one, but deep. I think it was Deep Inside. Deep Inside the Joe Sarno was called Das Strandhaus. Das Strandhaus on the actual boxes, which when it came in, I was just like automatically just nonstop saying Das Strandhaus, because it was just so funny to think of that movie as being Das Strandhaus. But it makes sense. It's the river house, the river house.
So, did they have original elements, or were these just like? Yeah, but were these like original elements, or were these just like prints that had been distributed in Germany?
Yeah, so they did not have the original. What they had, I think someone in the United States had the OCN. They duped it, basically. I believe it's in there, or in the US when this happened. There's so many labs back then. They would send the duped material to Germany, this dupe negative, and from that dupe negative, Germany and the German distributors would be able to make prints. So this one came from a dupe negative. Also, that Deep Inside and Las Vegas Strangler both came from dupe negatives, because that was just a very common way to deal with these black and white films, but very cheap. But luckily they had it, so that's like kind of a miracle. Nothing else exists here. Well, actually, there's something here, but I think it was included in the box set, I believe, but for Las Vegas Strangler. But yeah, not for OCN. That was literally the earliest generation piece of film to exist for that film. But yeah. Other than that, there's what is the 1971? It's moving to the color. What's Love is wild. Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, originally shot in the earliest. Did you like that one?
I loved it.
Weird.
Actually, I liked it more the
It's
second
really
time I watched
cool,
it, because
right?
there's just like So I just uploaded my review today, so I don't think you've seen it. Most people haven't yet. But I
Hmm.
straight up couldn't remember what it was about. And I tried looking it up and nobody else knew. And I was just like, I think this one is just vibes. I don't know. There's not really a plot going on
Yes.
here. It's just
Yeah.
kind of like these random vignettes. And I really liked it.
I love those types of things. Like when I
Hmm.
watched it the first time, like I watched it just like trying to get the plot, and then if you do that, you're bound to fail with a lot of the Topolino movies. But like with this one, you're just seeing weird fucking like I don't know, there's something punk about that one where it's just
Hmm.
like the Jesus and the Earth sequence, which is so again sacrilegious, or it's just like how like this movie makes no sense, but it's literally just cool 80s music. And
Hmm.
they didn't know how to make it a movie, so they just put weird 80s music over it. Yeah, I really
Yeah,
like that one.
if you make a like super sexy, like gender bendy movie about Satan with like subverted religious imagery, like I'm going to be into it. Like that's just kind of
Yeah.
how it is, you know?
Yeah. No, for sure. I mean, that one, yeah, I mean, that one is just super, like, super subversive and super cool and, like, very surprising. Because a lot of the Tobalina movies are, like, they have complexities in their own ways, but that one is particularly, like, I like the idea of someone trying to make something out of nothing. I think that's really,
Hmm.
like, something that I really love about, finding films. Like, a lot of the times you're just, like, you shoot hundreds of feet of film and then or thousands of feet of film and you're able to you literally can't do anything. There's so many films like that. But this one, yeah, luckily we had that was a weird one because it was 35 millimeter AB roll, where normally it's a 16, you'd find 16 millimeter AB roll, but we had it looks really beautiful too with all the smoke and the mist and the lighting because of the
Hmm.
fact that it's from the original negative. So that one and Beware are both from the OCN. And yeah, Sex Serum of Dr. Blake, uh, or Voodoo Heartbeat if you want to incorrectly. But Sex Serum of Dr. Blake was a very famous um, exploitation movie where basically, yeah, there are different cuts. Now we have the horror cut of the trailer in the film archive, which I'm always really proud about now, thanks to a really cool Vinegar Syndrome person who likes our movies and who really did us a service. Unfortunately, it passed the time when the release came out. If only it made it to the release. But um, that one was just really interesting because we have multiple cuts. There's a horror cut, a sex film cut, which was uh, we have the Sex Serum of Dr. Blake version, and that came from the Belgian Cinematheque, but is owned by a private film collector.
Hmm.
There's also Violated, the Renee Bond. Oh, sorry, now I'm just listing, but I do think about them all often.
No,
Or
that's good because I did
the Renee
want
Bond, which
to.
is just this really cool.
Sorry, our connection, we're stepping
No,
over
no, no,
each
no,
other's words a little
no,
bit,
no, no.
but I apologize if I interrupt you at any point. But that one, oh, I wanted to ask, generally, this is good that we're doing this because, like, when I watched the documentary and then I watched all the introductions, like, the documentary has such a great narrative of, like, searching and discovery and, like, finding
Mhm.
these, like, films that have been lost to time in, like, encrusted in, like, shit in, like, a random warehouse and stuff, you know? And I was
Mm,
wanting to
yeah,
know where all of these films were found and, like, what archives and stuff they came from. And, most of
yeah.
them, I didn't have that information, which I understand if it was left out, but I'm glad I have you to just ask for to satiate my own curiosity, and then hopefully other people get something out of it too.
Yeah. I mean, like, that's what's interesting to me too, because it's not I wish it's the cheaper things are kind of the ones which we found in-house, like Red Midnight or Beware the Black Widow technically, or What's Love. But one of the most fascinating things about this is it was really a collaboration with a lot of different um companies and archives and institutions. And I think at the very beginning of when Vinegar Syndrome started, I think it was largely there was always a focus on preserving things that other people didn't think were worth preserving, but
Mhm.
a lot of that was because there was a lot of film. There was a lot of rare materials which were here that needed to get out somewhere, and now we've built up all these connections with archives and archivists And now, even with something like that, the FW Murnau-Stiftung was tricky because they, you know, they deserve all the credit for finding that, but also they deserve the credit for trusting us with it, I think, and having it like giving those films justice, or doing the films justice rather, where basically, I do care about that a lot. I genuinely do think that the coolest. There's so many movies from other places, and that's what made it kind of like. It could have just been like, honestly, we could have released like 30 movies, which are lost films. I think we have one of the largest collections of just lost films because of the fact that like we're trying to figure out ways of like putting them out, and you can't just automatically just put out a lost film. You have to like, there's an enormous amount of work that goes into this, even if it's public domain. Where a lot of these were really costly because we wanted to get the coolest lost films, you know? And I think, even with Violated is probably like, it's a really good movie. Like, you didn't, okay.
I loved it's nasty as fuck, and it's kind of
It's so
I had a hard time defending it a little bit in my review because it's so nasty, but it is like really good, honestly.
It's really good. Like, I always go back to. I remember like when I was like, when I first saw it, and I was just like, like like when you can. I love masks because you get to read into what the filmmaker actually. Like these are really specialized kills, and then when you see the masks that actually are given to each kill, you can read it. There should be essays about this movie. But that one was really special to me. I think that one, and I know I shouldn't say this, pick favorites. I always have favorites anyway. As the de facto parent of the films and the film record, I genuinely loved Violated and Rare Blue Apes probably the most. If I can be like, again, doing the thing that I shouldn't do. But I just love those two things are just versions of films that I've always loved because they're just either so weird or so gruesome and cruel for no reason, but also just badass at the same time. But yeah, Rare Blue Apes I've spoken about too much. Hard as a Rock, You, Me, and the Papa. I had
That's
a
such a
friend that I
banger.
watched with. So good. Like it's such a great song. I watched it with he appears in the documentary because he helps out in shipping a lot and other areas. He also goes through some of our materials, sometimes winds through. Another archivist, Austin Miller. We watched it really early on, and both were like, "This is like Carnival Magic level, like fucking."
There's nothing
was
else
really
quite
fun.
like it.
Problem was we just kept making references to him. There's nothing like it. Like, and I like, it's not surprising because it's Don Greer, but at the same time, it's just, how can something like this be made and then forgotten is just beyond me. But I think that's what makes this time period really interesting too, where it's just like, there's so much that we still need to dig up. There's so many cool things. But even Last of the American Hobos is really cool. And the outlaw motorcycles from 66 or something like that. But like that one was from if you know Bob Murawski, like Grindhouse video. He found that one, and he's just been a big advocate of like this company since way before I was even here, and it's just a major film badass who's always advocating for exploitation and rare horror. So that one was like largely due to him being a badass, but also just interest from us, I think. And my favorite line probably in any of the movies comes from that one where it says, "If only," I'm paraphrasing and I'm going to butcher it, but it's the stupidest line of all time where it says, "If only everyone could be hobos, then the world would be a better place," or something like that. And I rewatched that because the delivery was like, who is someone delivering this seriously? Or but
I like to believe it was said in earnest. You know?
I hope so. I really hope so, because I agree. Everyone should do. But
All
Yeah,
right,
and they,
so just to
all of them are.
cover our bases real quick, so you said Hobos was found through Grindhouse.
Mm.
Where was Violated and Rare Blue Apes? Like, where were those found?
Rare Blue Apes was found by Sean at the Academy, kind of through Sean at the Academy Film Archive. That's Rare
Mm.
Blue Apes, and Violated was Library of Congress. Sometimes I
Oh,
get them
okay.
wrong because yeah, Violated was the Library of Congress. John Snelson is a really great archivist there. But the Rare Blue Apes came in a large kind of donation that they kind of sifted through, and it's from a
Mm.
print. That's probably the worst condition
Yeah,
element in the whole thing, where that's a major bummer because it's so cool. Did you see that intermittent damage, water damage, throughout the first and third? I think it's first and third reels. But that's literally just because it was in a Goldberg on its
mm.
side, and like one section of moisture got in, and it's you know
That makes
it
sense because
if
there's this like bizarre like pulsing effect in the colors or something that is kind of tough to sit through until you get used to
yeah.
it. And I was curious what, and like you're saying that's water damage is what's going on
That's
there.
water damage. Yeah,
Yeah.
water. That one was like it was a slight water damage, more moisture damage probably. Again, these were
Mm.
physical materials, so the moisture like only on one side. But luckily, it didn't get through, so it actually took off the emulsion. Um, but yeah, moisture damage, that intermittent, because it also moisture also causes like uh, yeah, the layers to soften and weaken up. But luckily, it wasn't is still image. We have films here which have been through much worse, because they were just stored in storage lockers before they got here. You
Mm-hmm.
know, so crazy.
So,
But
what about Sex Serum? I forget if you said, but where did you guys find that one?
yeah, Sex Doom of Dr. Blake, Belgian private collector, Belgian Cinematheque. Yeah,
Because that one's got
but,
like two subtitle tracks burned in, and then I had to put the English subtitle track on and like physically move it on top of the other two so I
no,
could read it. And so I was kind of watching it through subtitle tracks, but
oh
you know.
no, I feel like that could have been like that. We could have avoided that. That's a bummer. Um, but yeah, so that's where that one came from. That's probably the. I think there may be one other print, but I think they're both subtitled. That is also another issue which comes up where
Mhm.
sometimes they wouldn't pay for dubbing. All you'd have is a
Yeah, I
burned in.
figured, I figured that was like the option. When you say
Yeah.
that could have been worked around, I'm curious, what did you think when you said that could have been done to
Oh,
mitigate that?
oh, you mean like well, I guess I mean digitally speaking. In
Mm.
theory, we could have like made it a different color or something like
Oh,
that.
I
But
understand. Like put
in
like a
terms,
border around it or something, or like
yeah,
a
or
background or
something which
something. Yeah,
blocks out.
like
Yeah, yeah,
shadows.
you
Yeah,
know. Yeah,
I got
yeah,
you.
yeah. There could have been something, but that requires creativity and then a panel of people being like, "Does that work better than what we normally do?" And then I feel like, yeah. But I think theoretically speaking, there's some really big releases. I think Detour is probably the most famous example. I think that's a famous example. I think it's Criterion or someone like
Mm.
that, where basically it has the only existing element is like a print with burned in subtitles or something like that, French subtitles. And apparently they found a few reels of it a long time ago here. And like that's all they have. So they have to
Hmm.
work around digitally these subtitles. Um, but yeah, they're
I'm
very
surprised it
famous
doesn't
examples.
happen more, honestly, because I
I
feel like
know
that's a pretty
it
common thing.
super common, and it's like, and yeah, because like there things get lost so easily. It's like
Hmm.
8 reels to complete a shorter feature where it's just like smaller reels. But it's like, yeah, if you only have something which is already in a film archive and not in like a, I don't know, you don't have the OCN. That's one of those classic examples where that one really, someone should have taken care of that a little bit better. But yeah, yeah. So that was where that one came from. We find a crazy amount of weird shit here, and usually give it to other people, and then they get the credit for it. But in this case, I think it was nice to actually,
Hmm.
um, yeah, actually pull from other people's collections, and other archives are really awesome about opening their doors. Um, yeah,
And
I think,
then Barbara, my favorite of the set,
yeah,
actually. Where was that one
really.
found? Yeah. I think
Okay.
so.
Yeah.
It's close between that and Violated. They're both so fucking out there and extreme that I think that's why I gravitated towards them, but I think that was the one. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, Barbara was like, yeah, again, Barbara was like a singular, like direct from the producer. It was, I believe, our acquisitions person. I could be wrong, but I believe the producer had a bunch of film materials, and the daughter or something
Mm-hmm.
like that basically gave over the rights and the only film material.
Got you.
Which, um, yeah, so that one was very exciting because that came in. Joe and Ralph, two of the owners, drove up one day, and this was very early on. This happened a long time ago. I think they even posted something to Facebook about it, where basically I found out from Facebook that they got this before they told me that they were going to get it, which was
Mm-hmm.
as infuriating. No, I'm not kidding. But then they came up with this, and I was just like, we were watching it, and it just looked stunning. Like it looked really
Yeah, it
beautiful,
does.
and so complex, and so like the perfect. It's a really perfect. Like I know it's like 70, but like it feels like late 60s encapsulated
Mm-hmm.
in a movie where it's so
Mm-hmm.
confusing, and there's so many like um, I don't know, like cool mentalities being thrown around and experimented with, and
Yeah.
it's basically like a Bergman movie. It's
Yes.
like it's Persona, but like
It's very artsy.
artsy, but like yeah, but super like sexually, like what is it called? Experimental in terms of what they could
I
show, and I
I
think that's
described
probably
it
why.
as like a sexual anarchy, where it's just like
Yes,
everything
yes,
goes, and to the point
everything.
where a
Yeah,
lot of it is like indefensible, to be honest with you. And I think it's interesting that my two favorites I had the hardest time defending, but maybe that's just kind of
yeah,
what I gravitate towards is like, wow, they really went there, you know?
yeah. But I mean that also is really important too. It's good to be able to
Hmm.
defend things that other people don't really get.
Hmm.
That's like I think that all the time where people are like, why this? And I'm like, because you haven't seen it yet and you haven't
Yeah,
given it a chance yet. I think
yeah.
that's what's really important with being a cool film watcher now. But so I appreciate that those are your two favorites. Yeah.
Is that
I
all of
mean,
them? Did we go through all 10?
I think so.
I think
I
so
that would
too.
be if I left any out, I deserve to be shamed. But yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's
But yeah,
everything.
crazy. 10. I think I may have done it. Congratulations, Oscar.
All
You
right.
flew.
Hell
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, so now that we kind of have that, real quick though, how long, like, this might be a difficult question to answer, but how long did this
Mhm.
project take to come to fruition? Because you said that Barbara showed up years ago, so I don't know if you want to count that, but like from the inception of the idea to the printing of the boxes, I'm
Yeah.
curious how long.
Yeah. Um, you know, I think the first we have different people at the company, and like technically speaking, I was the times are very difficult. Yeah, so this was like I believe it kind of like the when it was first proposed, it was all these things happen in various like
Hmm.
stages. I think the Lost Pictures show kind of came up not in the name, but in the idea of
Hmm.
doing a Lost film set with 10 Lost films.
Hmm.
It's always thrown around because we have Lost films like hanging from the
Sure.
rafters here. But the first time there's actually a formal meeting, I think it was like probably like early 22 or late 21, I believe.
Mm.
And
Okay.
but it was batted around, and I think there were three uh films too, which even came to the building because we had to watch them before putting them on the set. So there's like a really cool the one that I wanted came to the building and was deemed boring by someone. I thought it was cool, and like uh, yeah. So that's kind of when it kind of started taking shape, and then we started having conversations with Elijah about the documentary around that
Hmm.
like a little bit around that time too. I think early 22, and yeah, the whole documentary took a was because that was largely the connecting thread, because that was kind of like how we were going to contextualize all the movies too, and kind of explain the histories of everything. So it used to kind of just be like explaining the movies, and then Elijah really wanted it to be like explaining, because Elijah's worked with us for a really long time, and I think he has this cool outsider but also insider mentality, where he's always kind of been on the outside. And he's like, why I shouldn't say this, but what, like, he does documentaries, and then it's like, why is it taking so long to get my payment or something like that? Because he was on the outside but also on the inside, and like I think he was always fascinated by the company and how it functioned, because it's a weird, no one has a film archive right next to a scanning lab and next to a restoration center, all above the shipping department where the Blu-rays get sent out daily. That's like, it's a very weird thing. So I feel like he really wanted it to be also focusing on Vinegar Syndrome, and I think everybody was like, oh, we don't want it to be like an infomercial. But I think he framed it really perfectly about, like, I don't know, trying to focus on the film, because that's what we all care about in the end. It's not really about Vinegar is just a way to get to the film, you know. Even if we haven't put it out yet, we're going into work at a place called Vinegar Syndrome. We have to all care about film to some extent, I guess. So yeah, but that's kind of, it took but like, again, like maybe 4 months before, that was when Red Midnight came up, and because it was in the building, that was so technically speaking, like a lost film is a film that isn't known to exist by experts and is not watchable like in the fullest extent that it was meant to actually be seen in. So like there are many, technically speaking, it should be called the extant film show, because we knew where all these films were, like for like a few, like maybe a year and a half or 2 years, but these are also lost films, you know. So, and I think extant is a subcategory of lost film, and these films were like, I hope like in some form or another that like we're able to kind of like continue doing lost film stuff, but it's, you know, it is very tricky. It was very weird to see. Yeah, well, nonetheless, I digress. Shot in the regular scissors. Yeah, so it took a really long time. I think the only true lost film, technically speaking, if you want to really break down which one no one knew to exist, was probably Red Midnight, because we only discovered it 4 months before. So that was literally like find to disc. That never happens. So, and whether it be because of rights or we were looking for better materials, like Massive American Hobos, the original cut element existed, but it was so vinegared that we couldn't use it. We had to use a print. So it's like, you know, we continuously tried to find better materials even throughout the entire process, and we're able to unearth and dig up rocks, like turn over rocks in order to find things. But those are the best materials to exist for all of those films. I hope one day we can find the OCNs, the rare breaks of the Cannibal Isle. You know, that would be really cool. But I highly doubt it. It's probably in some lab, in like defunct lab in Malaysia or like Southeast Asia. Totally gone. But now it's out there, and now people can like hear about the Umpapas, you know. But
well,
not much.
I gotta say, a year and some change is way shorter than I was expecting when I asked that question. It took me almost 6 months just to review the box set, so the idea that you guys did it like from start to finish in like a little over a year is honestly kind of astonishing to me. So I guess congratulations on that. Just insane turnaround there.
I mean, but you also have to take into account, it seems like that too. But a lot of these films were kind of like, you know, they want to do lost film, and like the Tobolino movie, our favorite, What's Love, or the original version, What Is Love, or whatever. That was in the archive sitting since we acquired the Tobolino stuff, which was like like
Yeah.
more than a half baker's dozen years like back. So
Yeah.
it's like um a lot of these things were kind of like there's a need for a framing because we
Yeah.
thought it
Yeah.
was
Yeah. Yeah.
cool. But no one is just gonna buy a Lost
Sure.
Tobalina movie.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we
That
always
makes
joke
sense.
about we always joke about the gorilla movie. What's the famous gorilla movie? The that Tobalina did, like doing a 4K UHD of it's such a it's a great movie. Um, not very good, but we always joke about that one, like doing a 4K UHD. But they're tough to market, you know.
Uh-huh.
And What's Love is also particularly tough to market because it's like
Sure.
not exactly porn, but it is like porn adjacent. So
That's a good
uh,
word for it, I think. It really
yeah,
seems to think that it's not, even though parts of it clearly are, but I think as a whole we could call it adjacent, you know.
yeah, yeah. But it definitely deserves to be on the back of like if one goes to a party, it should be playing
Mm.
at every
Hmm.
third at every third party along with like Snipes from Agfire or something. But
Yeah.
yeah,
I thought it was really
yeah,
cool that that one in particular, the one sheet of it appears in Irreversible. And like as soon as I
yeah,
learned that fact, it like clicked. I was like, "Oh yeah, I remember seeing it in that scene. That's crazy." So it's just like
yeah,
even from that perspective, I think it's worth like connecting the dots there and like finding this kind of curious piece and so people can actually see it, you know?
totally. Well, I mean, Gaspar Noé and like a lot of these filmmakers were like they like the things which were looked over too. Like Nicholas,
Mhm.
like Winding Refn is like pretty Refn is
Yeah.
pretty well known for his like of things that other people haven't even gotten the chance to watch, you know? So I feel like all these guys wanted to make cool references to things which would, you know, everyone's kind of connected to archiving in their own weird way, whether it be a poster or marketing or promotion, or just a poster hanging out on their wall. Yeah, yeah, that's a weird one. That is a weird like appearance by that film,
Mhm.
but it makes sense after you see What's Love. It's kind of like yeah, I can see. I don't know if you
There's some
watched it
connective
though.
tissue there, you know?
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Um, so the way we kind of touched on it already, but I wanted to formally ask you, the way I would define a lost film is that we know it exists, either from like primary documents or interviews or posters or what have you. But for whatever reason, we can't watch it, meaning that the elements are literally lost or confirmed to be destroyed, and at no point did anybody like transfer that to a VHS or record it in the theater or something. Like for whatever reason, there is no way to see the film in its totality. And there might be like
Mm,
a reel left over, there might be a trailer left over, but in terms of
mm.
being able to watch the film, no matter how poor quality from start to finish, we can't do it. That's kind of how I would define a lost film. I'm curious though. I thought you gave a really great definition in the interview, in the documentary, but just for our purposes here, I'm curious how you go about that definition.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important to note that there's while my brain likes to simplify everything to classifications and sciences and like putting things into boxes, it's not always easy with these types of things like lost films. But I think yeah, yeah, like what I kind of brought up earlier, something like what you said, it's something which was confirmed to have existed, but um is not watchable in the fullest extent of like
Mhm.
getting the narrative and everything like that. I think they're very famous examples, the most famous examples of lost films, and why I also do like this set because everyone thinks, oh, it's only silent era stuff. If you
Mhm.
look up lost films right now, you'll only come up with silent films, pretty much, with some very special inclusions. But like, I think it's a film which is confirmed to have existed, but in the fullest version, where you can get the idea of the narrative and there's no blatant omissions, you can't watch it. That means like, you know, I say it more eloquently in the set, I think, because Elijah kept telling me to redo the question because I didn't do it well. Um, but I think yeah, I also do think having it in the original format is really important too, because I think
Mhm.
for preservation value, um, I really do think it's really, really key um, to keep the actual identity of the original material. If you, well, it may have been, there are a few VHSs of like some of these movies, like famously, I think Titus Moody would like burn VHSs if you wanted a copy of like that movie, but that's such a small market. It's such a niche market that it's not widely distributed. So yeah, I think it becomes very tricky because I think very, very early on in silent film, you'll find these big gaps in very historical films that mean a lot to the history of the medium. And where like the first robot movie is partially lost from Italy. And I want to see that movie. Technically speaking, a fragment of it exists.
Sure.
But you can't watch the movie. It's lost. So it's like, even if you find, I think there's like, if you wanted to break it down as like a science, if it's like still existing, and you can watch it and it's 90% there, maybe that is still, that shouldn't be considered a lost film. But to me, especially archivally speaking, I will always go back to the original negative. The original negative is the film to me. And there's one original negative for every single film that was shot on or cut on film. And like, if you lose that original element, that is the film. And a lot of these films did not get duped to other materials. So I don't know, it gets very complicated, because I think with something like Das Strandhaus, Deep Inside, where it's like, we're really lucky that like film is kind of able to clone, it's able to dupe itself. You can make a new version of it and it's still there. But that is a very rare thing. So I always kind of go back and think of the original negative. Like, I think that there is still some loss in the fact that we put it verbally out from a print, which is severely water damaged, and you'll never be able to see that movie in the glorious version with the best, most accurate, like vibrant colors that it deserves. But you still get to see it. It's very complicated. Sorry, that was a rambly answer.
No, I think there's that interesting gray area where now we can watch it, but the original version is still lost to time. An example I think of is the Altered Innocence release of the Fred Halstead films. At the 11th hour, like, Elizabeth Purcell acquired a VHS copy of Truck It, I think is the film. And so it's on there. Like, beforehand, all they had was a film element of like one reel or like a trailer or something. But now you can see the full uncut version in VHS. And I tried to sit through it and it's really rough. It's a terrible transfer. But like, that's all we have. So, it's not a lost film anymore. We can see it. But is it really seeing it when it's in that such deteriorated form, and it's like you can barely understand what anybody's saying, and it's like, it's better than nothing. But there's still kind of like a partially lost element to something like that,
No, totally. I completely agree with you. Where I think that's where it gets really tricky to me, because I've watched things where I'm surprised at the end of it that this is even considered a film, and I'm just like, I can't look past the amount of like video analog noise. Like if you watch something on VHS and it's so incredibly, like, the fuzz and the, like, I don't know, all of that interference, it gets very, very difficult. Where like the goal of this is to actually just be able to see the film, get lost in the film, like it afterwards or dislike it. And I think, I'll always like, I had this argument with Joe like earlier like at the end of last year, where basically we have a lost Tobalina movie, and he once told me that we had a 1-inch somewhere for it, and we have the original negative and a 1-inch. Apparently it was cut and then transferred to video. And I said, well, I want to see that movie. Why has that not been transferred? And he's like, because the OCN is like completely water damaged and shot. I went through it, kind of like, luckily it didn't impede into the image that much. It's still, you can still do something with it. But like, but I think that was like where it gets complicated. Like I think that there's a value of being able to see something and determine whether or not it's worthy of like we could transfer that tape and put that movie out. But it's going to be such a jump from original camera negative to a 1-inch open reel video that it's like, is it valuable? For preservation purposes, probably. But it gets really, really complicated when it's like something like that. Like Liz Purcell is one of the like true masters in this field, like bringing and branding these cool fucking movies. Like Sex Demon is like one of the first things that I like worked on when I was here, because we scanned it here, and like, but that work that she does is just like major badass. But yeah, there's so much that gets lost, especially when like people think it's not valuable or people think it's not marketable. We fall victim to that too. We don't really put out all male stuff anymore, which is a major bummer, because we put out bijou and like, you know, all these things. But I think that's why it's really important to have a person who's just caring for the materials. You have a film archive. These films are going to be cared for even if they're not going to be put out, with the best possible transfer. And if other people have the rights, they can talk to us and we can like, figure out a method of getting them their best version of the film. It's happened multiple times. But yeah, that's how it happens all the time, where it's like at the last hour, something shakes up someone who has something and they're like, oh, I didn't know anybody was interested in that. Do you want this? And then it always happens like that. Like, I forgot which movie it was. Yeah, it was like the worst example is of like the Playgirls and the Vampire, where at the last minute negative popped out of nowhere.
Oof.
And we didn't know whether or not it was the original negative or a dupe neg, and a dupe neg would have been made from our fine grain master. And when I opened the reel really quickly, we were about to scan it and just be like, we got the neg, but like immediately I was just like, it's not the original negative. And we actually did find the best element here. Kind of like a good thing, but it's also just a sad realization where, you know, there are many copies. You just want to get the best copy. You can't find the original because people don't want to keep original stuff. Sorry, no, I'm just getting depressed about people throwing away old stuff. But yeah,
Real quick,
yeah,
you said you guys don't put out, did you say all male stuff anymore?
yeah. That's the technical term for movies which are like marketed towards gay pornographic
Okay.
or erotica. That's like the.
So you're talking about like
technical-
men loving men, like porn films, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Is there a reason for that you're not putting that stuff out anymore?
Well, it's because of the fact that we're always trying to think of new ways of like bringing them to people. And the truth of the matter is, the Wakefield Pool stuff just didn't do as well. It's really important stuff. Like Boys in the Sand is such a like seminal film, really important film. Bijou is like a really beautiful movie, regardless of whether or not you like adult stuff or hardcore stuff. But they, you know, most archives are not for profit. We're a for profit. The owners kind of like say to me, where they're just like, you're the non-profit sector of the business, where basically all of the films there we're keeping because of the fact that we care. So I get resources regardless of whether or not it's going to make money back. And I think that's really important. But yeah, it's predominantly just because of the fact that they didn't sell as well as everybody thought. And he's a great artist. Like Wakefield Pool's movies are really, really beautiful, amazing soundtracks, and so incredibly poetic. And also with that beautiful touches of surrealism and weird artsy 60s, 70s mentalities. But yeah, we're always trying to figure out ways, because we have a lot of that stuff, you know, like a lot of the best surviving elements for things. I wish, as a lost film wish list, I wish we could put out him or even find him, like the gay Jesus Christ movie. That would be the coolest release of all time. Do you know about this one?
I don't,
Yeah,
but I instantly need to see it.
it's I know that's what makes lost films so enticing and cool. Like I just need to see a movie where it's like, I believe it's in New York City, but it's Jesus Christ walking through the metropolitan area, just kind of like just having sex with dudes. It's like, sounds badass as hell, just in a toga, you know? Like, how can you not want to see something like that, especially uh, when these like films were so difficult to market even at the time? But there are a lot of really cool lost films from that like genre, if you want to call it that, or subgenre, where I really, really wish we could find some of this stuff.
Well,
But
I think we need to
big
make it a
one.
mission collectively to find Jesus getting nailed by the 12 apostles. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
12 disciples.
or just or just make it a movie, or make it a like a VSP or something.
Uh,
Yeah, there was a rumor that it was somewhere, but I think it kind of died down. I think the person who said it kind of
um,
wasn't, maybe, yeah. But anyway,
well, I think a lot of people, I mean, me personally, and then I think a lot of people in this community probably are saddened to hear that that stuff isn't doing as well and that there's not as much of an incentive to put it out. So, real quick, if you wouldn't mind just sharing the titles that you think um, fall into this category that didn't sell as well, let's go ahead and put a spotlight on them and maybe put out a call to action to buy some
mm,
copies of this, to send a message. You know what I mean?
yeah, definitely. If you please, anybody check out any of the things. If you look up, I think we have like a search in the website. If you want to look up like anything Wakefield Pool,
Hmm.
like those are big. I think we've put out some. I'm gonna have to look up the other ones which have been put out. But look, anything Wakefield Pool. He's a really important filmmaker, really important artist, uh, who wasn't really making. These aren't even exploitation movies. They're art house like experiments in film. Uh, and again, Boys in the Sand is one of the most important movies of that turn from the 60s to the 70s.
Hmm.
This is like a really seminal film that doesn't really get the credit that something like Deep Throat ended up getting all the accolades for. But even then, the other ones are really cool too. I'm blanking on one of them, but anything Wakefield Pool. Like, I hope we can like, yeah, any, yeah, check those movies out. Honestly, they're really, really worth it, and especially interesting. I had a friend who once asked me, he was like, "Should I watch this movie?" And he pointed to Bijou, and I was like, "Yeah, yeah, of course." And he was like, "I mean, I'm not really into that, if you know what I mean." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And he was like, "I mean, I'm not into that." And I'm like, I think the majority of people who are buying the adult stuff are kind of, especially from the site, are really interested in the history and the
Uh-huh.
actual like cinematography and the stories. And the famous example is of the person fast forwarding through the sex scenes or something like that. But I
Hmm.
think, I think like the home media consumer now, it's kind of past the titillation factor of these movies. They're
Sure.
just really beautiful documents.
There's other places to get that sort of thing. I think that they're more interesting as films nowadays, you know?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, perfectly put. Yeah,
Um,
agreed.
all right, let's see. I don't want to keep you too long, so let's see if we can power through some of these other questions I have written. Getting into the more philosophical weeds as to the purpose of this project in general. Um,
Mm,
something that I'm always thinking about is the distinction of like what is art and what isn't, which is I think
mm,
a very difficult question to answer, honestly. And so it kind of ties into like this idea of where this project was largely fighting against the idea that films like this don't deserve to be preserved, you know? And I think
mm,
that most people, at least the people who buy the box set, can agree. And like when I watch the films in the set, the idea of them not existing is like it doesn't compute. Like I've seen it, now it exists, you know what I mean? And the idea of it not is so bizarre and like kind of sad, even if I didn't like it, you know? Um,
mm,
but my brain likes to take me to like the logical conclusion of these things. And especially I think in like the digital age where there is more being produced every single day than could realistically be preserved. I'm just like,
mm,
I'm sure in 50 years, like all the cat videos I have would probably be interesting to somebody from like an
mm,
anthropological point of view, right?
mm,
But when
mm.
you have 4 billion people filming their cats every day. Like, there's a line somewhere, you know what I mean? In terms of like what we can realistically devote our resources to. And I know that this is getting beyond your purview as I'm now talking about digital as opposed to shot on film things. But like, I'm sure there's a million home movies shot on film of people's cats and of random things that might not have quote unquote value to us today, but
Mm.
maybe they do. I'm curious if you have thoughts or an answer as to like where we have to call it in terms of what we can realistically think to archive versus what we
Mm.
kind of have to let enter the dustbin of history. Maybe if you want to just answer it from a standpoint of things shot on film, you can, but I'm curious where you stand on that larger question.
That's such a good question. Yeah, that's a really good question. I think I like, yeah, because I think about that all the time. Because we spend a lot of money. We spend a lot of money on preserving things that like
Mm-hmm.
it's the constant question. How do you determine what's worth preserving is like one of the most basic tenets. Because you're right. You said it perfectly. You can't preserve everything. I wish we could preserve everything. But the having too much stuff also makes no stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I think in some weird way, where if again, like the
Right.
pallets, we had pallets and piles of film, so much film that there was no inventory of, no one kind of sifting through and researching. I think, I think being organized. I think organization is one of those easy, uh, organization and motivation is one of those easy ways to tell from a digital standpoint what is worth preserving. Like if you can like have the what's it called, the agency to um, like back things up, multiple things up. That's something that's important. Um, I think if you just let things fall through the cracks and kind of like keep things in boxes and not really organize it, I don't know. It's debatable whether or not it's actually going to be something which is
Mm-hmm.
uh, you know worth actually putting resources and time. Preservation is not just about I don't know. Everybody always, we said it in the doc, but it's like it's not just about releasing something to disk and then it's out there. That's a part of it. It's a really important part of it. Like access is super important, but it's also making sure that like when the technology fails in all of our Blu-ray players, where they stop updating or people stop making Blu-ray players, or um, nothing is available on streaming anymore. The film is still alive, and it's only through organization and applying effort, time, uh, that you actually gain value, I think, and gain preservation value. I think, like I like reordering my like desktop and like putting this is adhesive tape residue 1, adhesive tape residue 2. This is a cat playing with roll of scotch tape, or something like that. And I think even just like a basic act like that is some kind of small call to the importance of preservation. Because
Mm-hmm.
we have a lot of materials here. Like it just last week we got a bunch of materials for a film that we've already released. It's like the At the Passing, the Genie movie. Um, but we've already put it out, and I hope we put it out already. But I think with that movie, we had so many other materials where it was like we had slot prints and work prints and work
Uh-huh.
prints for the trailers, and so many other video masters where it's just like we've way too many copies of this, and no other archive is going to take these other materials. And then we have to make this educated decision on whether or not it's worthwhile to keep them. We have an answer print, we have an inner positive, we have cuts from the OCN, we have trailers, we have 4 prints of that film. Like one, again, it's the answer prints, it's direct from the OCN, 3 perfectly good condition color prints. I think that's enough.
Yeah.
But it's
So
always a
do
constant
you,
ratio.
again, I'm getting into heretical territory here. When
Yeah.
you have 6 copies of the same film and they're in progressively worse condition,
Mhm.
I mean, do you throw some of them away? Like, do you donate them? Do you just sell them at an auction? Like, what's the idea there?
Well, with the
Because I'm sure
prints,
somebody
with
would
the
like to have the
actual,
shittier print. You know what I mean?
no, you're right, and I think that is one of those things. Like, to be perfectly honest, one of the prints went to me because I just wanted a cool print of it, and the other ones, like, we know all the collectors, and the collectors help us out.
Hmm.
I like just giving things to people,
Yeah.
um, and like maybe they'll help us out somewhere down the road. They usually do. They're usually, luckily, I think, throughout the entire time of us being here, I've thrown out very little film. You
Hmm.
know, I think it's shocking how much you can do with basic organization, and
Hmm.
just like everyone was just like, we're gonna have to throw out so much stuff because it's like, um, but we didn't have to do that. We literally
Hmm.
just had to organize it and put time and effort into it, and constantly argue about keeping things that I thought were important. And because, you know, everything can be important in the right, like atmosphere. Like, things can
Hmm.
be learning processes. Like, they're not all for preservation. They're not all for restoration. I think that's the biggest distinction, because we're elements focused here. If we have the OCN, what's the point in having something else? I think that there
Hmm.
is a point in having as
Yeah.
much stuff, and keeping it just in case. And we'll oftentimes donate something to another archive. Sorry, I'm blank.
No, you're
Uh,
okay. I've just had a silly idea, but go ahead,
oh,
finish your thought.
do, do tell. Uh,
Oh, I'm thinking of a future April Fool's Day purchase where you then end up with a reel of film that have like excess whatever that you guys have around.
oh, I mean, the weird thing is, I feel like people wouldn't hate that. I feel like they'd be like, yeah, we gotta. I mean, I would be super excited about getting a
Uh-huh.
reel of film.
I would be
You know?
stoked.
Yeah. I mean, we want to do the. We have so many of the Goldbergs now. Oh, you know what's funny about like not throwing away stuff? All
Hmm.
of the Goldbergs, like the metal shipping canisters, um, yeah, we're like, when we were able to give those away, those are actual things which are all in the archive. Like, all of the, like, if you know those, um, like these things, like
Hmm.
these guys, those are like actually all in the film archive. So basically, like, and you can see on uh different versions of the ones that people got, because I sometimes look at them when they post pictures of them and I get really excited about the titles. If they have an O on it, that O is for Oscar, because that was one that I was excited about, and it's an O on it. But like, we don't really throw away things here, and that's kind of by nature of the fact that we're a film archive, that literally we gain revenue by luckily we gain revenue by restoring movies,
Hmm.
and like, every single thing, no piece of flank is thrown out needlessly. We do try to use every single thing. I'm notoriously like, I literally try to use every little piece of effort.
Hmm.
If I put effort into something, I try to use it or bring it back in some other way. But it's a
Um,
big
I th
question.
I think you might have cut out for a second, or maybe I missed something. What did you say that you guys were doing with those film canisters? I think you called them Goldbergs?
Goldbergs, yeah, they're the Goldberg shipping canisters. They're for shipping prints elsewhere.
Hmm.
So basically, like, you'd put the reel, like, that one would fit like 2 or 3 reels, and then
Hmm.
you'd ship them to theater. But even canning prints at the beginning of all of this was a debate that I had, where I was just like, I'm gonna can the prints, and we're going to send them out to theaters. The problem is that's an added effort that kind of takes away from what I like doing, which is digging through stuff and finding original materials. But now we have 2 films in Belgium. We have 1 film in LA right now. We have one film, I believe, at the Roxy, um, and that's added effort. But it's really valuable added effort because people get to see things on film. But yeah, with the shipping canisters, we used to do these things where we sold the shipping canisters, the empty ones,
Hmm.
and I think people even got their orders in them. And I definitely think that we're going to be doing that again soon,
Okay, because
hopefully.
that was gonna be my question is, like, I think that's such a cool idea, and, like, I think people would be really stoked about that. Like, those metal ones next to you, you transfer them to, like, the blue polyethylene
Yeah.
or whatever ones, right? And I
Yeah.
assume that unless it's like completely rusted to shit, that would be a cool little collector's item, you know?
I love those. I have
Mm-hmm.
one in my fucking like yeah. And my favorite one is I have a Scorsese, the one from
Ooh,
Scorsese one from when I
which
was at
one?
East. It's Italian American.
Huh.
It's this like it has only the print of the short film that he did with his mom,
Mm-hmm.
and I've always loved that movie. And when I was at Eastman Museum and they recanned it, I was like, "Can I have this?" And
Oh, I
that
think
was
that's
just
so
one of those
cool.
moments. It's one of my treasures. It's like one of those really special things. But I think like all of those things have enormous histories. You can see every theater that they went to, you know, and yeah, those are all in the film archive. Like those are all in blue cans on the unless they were super vinegared, and then they're not in blue cans. They're in darker blue cans in our vinegar room, which we have off-site in another place in Connecticut. Um, but yeah, it yeah we're I think maybe this year we'll do it again. It's just
I think that would be so fun.
okay. I'll put an extra effort this year. It's just about me organizing it because it's
Selfishly, I'm pushing this
yeah
idea because I think it'd be sick, but you know.
yeah. I mean they're so cool, and even back in the day they were really expensive. So now it's like everyone was complaining last time about how expensive they were. These were always fucking expensive things,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah. Okay, I'll do it. By
All
request.
right. All right. On to our next difficult philosophical question. I confirmed this yesterday watching the documentary, but I just want to confirm it one more time. Film itself, like the material, is a lot like a human body in that it doesn't last forever, right? And like you can slow the decay, right? Which like in terms of a human body, maybe like healthier eating habits or something. You know, there's the ways you can mitigate the inevitable decay, right? But it is
Yeah.
inevitable, right?
Mm.
So
Yeah.
in the most pristine conditions, presumably what you guys have in your like cold room with the blue canisters and everything, how
Mhm.
long do you think is the reasonable lifespan of like a print of a film?
Yeah. Um. So yeah. So the yeah. It's very tricky because they say to go below 55 in the IPI. In IPI, and I believe that gets you like 30 years or something. The lower you go, it's like you gain so many years. I believe. That's like 30 years, which is pretty good. I think it's below 55. But they also didn't really take into account these vented cans. They didn't take into account polypropylene. Back then, there were plastic cans. There was like a mismatch of different types of materials that the film was actually stored into, and they tested everything, but they used like an
Mm-hmm.
averages mentality. Where they're like, this is what you're probably dealing with, so that we don't have to say, this is polyethylene film can. This is ferric ferric iron film can. This is galvanized metal film can, but whatever. But with you know it, there's this. I wish I could give you more accurate things, but I think the best way of thinking about it is everything which is in there. I think we're pretty confident in the fact that if it stays in these conditions, it's probably going to be like 50 years until it's really exhibiting some really like terrible decay, and it's in different like different stocks will change differently, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Like if it's never been wound through, that's also going to affect it. Like
Mm-hmm.
like you, theoretically speaking, you shouldn't touch the film, you shouldn't wind through it or handle it too much. I agree with that. I will not. I will not be handling all the original negatives without gloves, but like winding through allows the actual layers to be exposed to really clean air if it's in the right actual um, way of doing it. So even that kind of thing also helps. You know, we have things which are stage 3, and every once in a while, because I like the movie, I'll wind through it really slowly with a fan blowing on it. This is not an archival procedure. Every archive will probably be like, Oscar's a shitty archivist is doing pseudo archivist, but not really. They actually have done studies about like air ventilation. But nonetheless, I think it really depends on the film. I think with
Hmm.
the biggest problems are sound materials. I've said it before, but the biggest issues are the sound materials, where basically um, you're dealing with um, film is so many different materials, and all the materials interacting with each other and being exposed to oxygen, moisture in the air, fluctuations in temperature, that all affects the longevity of the film. But with full coat mag, which is basically just rust, that'll speed up the decay of the film. And that's probably the biggest issue, because oftentimes with lab materials, you'll find full coat mag in with original materials in the same can, just stored and breathing the same stale air over and over and over again
Mm.
for and in fluctuating temperatures where heat is trapped in, or worse, it's just like opened in a moist day and then you collect moisture on the inside. So it's a wide variety. I mean, I genuinely, my one of my dreams, because I have lame dreams where I dream of film, is like I want to get the temperature really, really low, like below 55, so that we can hit that IPI number, and basically, it would just make me sleep a little better at night, because we do really well. Like, even again, we have ACs running throughout the entire winter. That's a lot of energy.
Uh-huh.
And like, I care about the earth. Our electric bills go up, and we think it's important. And sometimes it's really difficult to validate that kind of thing. But like during the winter, if we had the ACs off, the all the electricity um, being used for the scanners uh, and the computers that like our restoration team is on, that heat would go straight into the film archive,
Hmm.
um, where you can feel on one wall it's going to be a little bit hotter. So there's really no like alternative other than like, not only is it just, we have to figure out ways of making sure that uh, in order to get to that 45 years or 60 years, when film is so easily maintain that everybody can have a print of this, or storage, every storage space is free for everybody, and we can store film everywhere, and we can make
Mm.
multiple copies of it, and stock is not too expensive. But
Hmm.
I'm just always hoping that we can get to that, just keeping them alive a little bit longer, because we have really bad cases of stuff, and when you see the bad cases, that's when you really understand there's no getting some of this stuff back. And I think that is
Hmm.
that's the worst thing about this job, where it's like you just want to get it, keep it from getting to that area as soon as possible. um, if we're not fighting for this and not doing it, we're just another part of the problem. And I think I'm glad to be a small little yelling person, yelling at people to, let's keep it cool, let's get it below 55. But it's not long, it's not a very long amount of time. You know I think everything changes and smells. Like, sometimes if you've ever found like old plastics, you can find them and they'll smell like vinegar, or they'll smell like something that's decay. And whether or not you can still play with a guitar pick that has gone vinegared, but you can't watch a movie if the emulsion has long since melted away. You know?
Okay, so inexplicably, Oscar is wearing a different shirt. I don't know why he just went up and got and changed, but it is what it is, I guess. No, we experienced some pretty severe technical difficulties yesterday towards the end of our conversation, and so we decided to pick it up again the next day, though with my perfectly smooth and you know, uninterrupted continuity here. You probably didn't even notice. So I think the last thing we had discussed was 30 years. You had told me that 30 years is generally what you can expect a film reel to
Mhm.
last in optimal conditions in a lab or in an archive. That is good, right? um,
Yeah, it's
and
pretty
my
good.
question
Yeah.
was that films that are older than 30 years, even on this very box set, that are in less than ideal conditions, are still usable and
Mhm.
are still transferable. And, I watch the films, so the the elements still exist after that time period. And so what I've always wondered, and I don't think I've ever heard asked, is like, what does that 30 years actually mean? Like, that's presumably not when the film materials are like completely unusable or disintegrated, but presumably there's some kind of degradation that is significant enough to quote that time frame. So I'm curious where the disparity is there.
Yeah, so I like to think of it like film deterioration is like, you know, I always use the way of thinking of it as like an apple. An apple has a very crisp taste. It's sweet, it has a very recognizable taste. And after a certain amount of time, it starts shifting, and it becomes more acidic. The sugars break down, and it starts catalyzing or continuous catalyzing. Once it changes to something else, that's very similar to how, you know, how vinegared film actually decays. I mean, you get apple cider vinegar, you get apple cider. First, it turns a little bit sweet, and then after that, it turns this really sharp vinegary taste. So, I mean, you know, it's apples. These are sugars and cellulose because it's made of plants. Everything's all connected. So that's probably the easiest way of thinking about it and putting it in really like concrete terms, where it's like, you can literally smell a stage 1 decomposition, which is perfectly fine to put in an archive and will last a really long time if you care for it the right way. So, yeah, it makes it difficult to drink apple cider, but it's still, you know, it is what it is.
So, if I'm understanding this analogy correctly, it's kind of like that 30-year quote there is kind of like, one day you're going to pick up an apple and take a bite out of it, and it's not going to taste like what you expect, but the apple is still there. It exists. You could eat it if you wanted to, but it's not exactly the pristine form you'd probably want before biting into an apple, right?
Yes, it's going to need a little bit, you know, I mean, you can't digitally, technically speaking, I feel like you could correct the look of an apple, and like, but in terms of like the we're not tasting film, so we're kind of free from the okay.
I don't believe you.
One time, it was one time, but I've never tasted film, but I have put it in a blender because I was trying to test out whether or not I could make a using very vinegared film, if I could make adding baking soda and vinegared film. I wanted to see if that could produce enough of a reaction to make I wanted to make a volcano out of vinegared film.
Did it work?
You know, it created enough like CO2 to pop like the bag, but you know, I believe it's CO2. But yeah, that kind of worked. But didn't eat it. Very disgusting though. Yeah. Yeah, well, what the basic that time frame kind of is usually, I believe, a lot of what they tested did these tests on. The Image Permanence Institute in Rochester did it on were prints, and that's a very specific use where basically a print is meant to not necessarily be a restoration material. It's meant to be a access material for theaters. After around, so it's basically, that's kind of where it kind of like narrows down, where you can kind of know if it shrinks above a certain percentage, it's not going to be movable by the sprockets. However, with negative materials, like that's kind of like a really good question to ask, because of the fact with negative materials, there's very sophisticated machinery that allows us to kind of bypass that issue with like projection. Where basically you can do sprocketless, or you can use software to bring back. There's a filter, there's the digital filter. So basically, it's a little bit longer for the negative materials. So I've always I've thrown that out as like the recommended, that's what the experts say. But that actual, like, a lot of the testing was due to it being done on prints. It kind of makes sense if you think about it, because an original camera negative or preprint material are much rarer, and also they're not really going to want to damage an original camera negative for the purposes of testing, they're going to use
Right.
prints which are fairly, as I hate the term, but non-archival.
Sure.
If it's something which is just a one reeler or something like that. So yeah, you've nailed it. Where basically, I think these things are going to last longer, but in terms of like the print material, which is meant for theaters, it's going to last much less for it to be usable. Half of the prints that we have are just here because of the fact that they're the only known print, and that makes them essentially close to a negative or a master material, something really valuable. So yeah, but that's a really good question. It's about shrinkage. It's about, because shrinkage is more about when the pitch between the perforations shrinks, and it shrinks by like, I believe it's like, you measure it in, it goes up to, if it goes past 1% of the actual length of the pitch or something like that. Like if it goes past that, very bad for anything which is, because these sprockets don't change. But if the film changes, it's going to sputter, it's going to be caught off guard. So it's tricky. It's a really good question because of the fact that it is tailored to print. With negative material, if we care for it, we can make these films last a really long time, especially if we don't just use the base averages of like all different types of cans. I like being very specific. Like in a galvanized can, it's going to last this amount of time. If it's vinegared, it's going to last this amount of time. If it's fresh from the lab, like a brand new struck acetate negative, it's going to last a really long time. Like we can make it last 200 years. But then it's just about building out the infrastructure for our archive, where basically that is the most like key to all of this. Where if we can, my goal is not just to care for them now, but it's to make sure that we have an infrastructure. So even past the time when they fire me for whatever they fire me for, like keeping too many films, or
One too many dry jokes in the
one too many
in the old
dry
videos.
jokes. Yeah, I mean, two of the owners like it. One of the owners does not like it. So I think it evens out. But
Yeah, that's a democracy. That's a
yeah,
majority.
yeah,
It's like a
I think
super
it's pretty
majority,
good.
actually. You're good.
Yeah. But yeah, for when someone else takes over the film archive, that like my next step, an archivist's next step, is making sure it's an archive and not just a collection managed by an archivist. So hopefully we have infrastructure, and I don't want to say like we have safeties put in place where basically these films are going to be safe and separated from any possible crazy whims. Like automatically we all go digital, only keep scans on LTOs, and we throw out all the film. Never gonna happen. Don't clip that or anybody. But I feel like that's kind of like the next step of this, because you're right, it literally depends on 10,000 different factors. But yeah.
So I'm curious, I know that like film itself is not a particularly old medium, and so we might not actually know the answer to this question, but do you know how long these things will actually like last until they are entirely unusable, entirely degraded, like to the point where like it might as well go in the trash? Like it's basically like turned to maybe not quite dust, but like you couldn't realistically scan it or use it in any way.
Right. Well, the thing is, the misconception, I think one of the largest ones, is that film is a really stable. I do think film is really stable. For the most part, most types of film, it's a lot of materials, but over a long period of time, they honed the methods of like making sure they're using the right materials to not fuck with the other layers. It's multiple layers, like it's silver salt, it's it's gelatin from animals, literally. So and then it's cellulose, and then organic dyes. So basically, we kind of know how well it's going to last over a long period of time. But if I can show you can I run off screen and show an example really quickly? Okay, cool. So this is like one example that I always kind of tried to point to, where I think it smells so bad. Half of it is like about the way it's actually stored, because of the fact that you can see, like if we'd held this if this was stored on its side,
Uh-huh.
it would have been it would have been able to equally off gas correctly up. And if it was vented on the bottom or had these little grates at the bottom, it would have been able to expel it outwards. But this was stored like this for the last 50 years. So you can see the actual plasticizer has now accumulated at the bottom because it was fluctuating. So it's like, and also, okay, this is going to be donated very soon, but this is like a very old film from the 1930s. You know, one reel of film from the 1930s, going to another institution tomorrow, which was just found. But essentially, this is like the other reels of this are perfectly fine. You know, so it can stay a really, really long time if it's in the pristine conditions. But for the most part, it's literally just about putting it in the right conditions. Like I always see film collectors like to store their films like this.
Yeah.
You know, it should always be like this. But yeah, it's a really stable medium. I think like it's frighteningly stable if in the right conditions. So half of archiving is this kind of like it's bringing it to a baseline where it's not going to change much. So it can last a really, really, really long time. You know, polyester film, they always throw out like hundreds of years or something like that. Polyester film, if we keep it like we have learned to keep acetate, is going to last way longer than that. So, you know, all of the like, we just have to care for it now, make sure it's taken care of, and don't just keep things in storage lockers. Like, so I don't know.
Well, that's really encouraging, honestly, because I always heard the 30 years and I'm like, well, that's really not a long time. If you're thinking about the long arc of history or whatever, or even like the history of this medium, that's like a third of it, you know? It's not a terribly long time. Now, this next question I'm going to ask you, I can almost guarantee nobody has ever asked before, but you said that it is partially made of gelatin. Now, that means that film is not vegan, and that is giving me very conflicted feelings right now. And so I'm curious, if I were to go to the store and buy a roll of Kodak film, like modern, like the film reels they used in fucking Oppenheimer or something, is that still made out of gelatin, or have they since created a plant-based alternative?
That is a really good question. I believe currently I could be wrong, but I think anything which is going to be like shot negative is still going to be on like actual animal gelatin. So you know, yeah, it's same as the Haribo, same as the like the gummy bears. Yeah, film is a conflicting medium. Yeah.
I'm well aware of the gummy bears. I haven't had a gelatin gummy bear in like 10 years, but like I've never even considered that. And now I gotta think about that. If I were to make a feature film, I don't know that it would actually be within my ethical purview to shoot it on film, because I know it's animal byproduct, but still, that's discouraging to me. I don't know.
Unless you see the label that says this reel of film was specifically produced without any animal, some animal, anything before like anything on film pretty much is free. You can just automatically assume that there's probably a lot of gelatin in it. But I think maybe polyester film could have been using synthetic gelatin, but I feel like the truth of the matter is these are companies which are trying to sell products, and like these gelatin, getting gelatin byproducts from like I don't know, what is it, meat processing plants is probably pretty cheap. Much cheaper than synthetic stuff. So I feel like that's probably just a way of keeping it down. So conflicting. Yeah, very conflicting.
Maybe I found my calling, and I need to create the first vegan certified cruelty-free film stock.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean,
yeah, if the people at home didn't know, the gummy bears and shit, if you see gelatin, that is like bones and gristle and general carnage from the slaughterhouse floor that they've then processed into a paste for you. So sorry if not
Yeah.
really, but I'm not that sorry if I've ruined gummy bears for you, but it's an interesting thing.
Yeah. I mean, like, the thing is too, any single time, you just brought up a really good point, because anytime someone releases a movie and they say there's an animal cruelty-free version, is it truly animal cruelty-free? It's still inherent.
You've brought
I
up
guess.
an interesting or a pretty common talking point in the vegan community, and I'm sorry, now I feel like I need to apologize for really taking us into the weeds, but people are always like, well, what kind of catering was on set?
Right.
You
Yeah.
said no
Yeah.
animals
Yeah.
were harmed. I want to see what people were eating,
All good questions. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Okay. So this next question, I actually feel differently about it now that you've answered my 30-year question than when I wrote it down, but I'm going to still ask it because I feel like a lot of people might be having this blasphemous thought, and it's one that definitely cropped up in my mind a few times watching the documentary and thinking about these things. Given that film is an inherently like impermanent medium, and I've heard of like digital rot in these things. I'm not too well versed in that stuff. Maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like digital files, when properly stored, are basically permanent unless some kind of hard drive fucking disaster happens. But that's why we have backup and cloud storage and all this and the other. I'm curious, and maybe I'm overselling the permanence of digital, and you'll tell me that in a second, but I'm curious, given the impermanent nature of film itself, is it more important to actually get this stuff scanned than to have it like perfectly preserved in a warehouse or in an archive? And like, once it has been scanned, and I do understand the short-sightedness of what I'm about to ask, but I think that it's important to get it on record anyway. What is the purpose of keeping this stuff around after we have it scanned in the best possible format? And, theoretically speaking, we have a permanent record of it at the highest resolution on hard drives and cloud servers and Blu-ray discs and everything.
Yeah, no, I think that's a point that our entire field is constantly wrestling with. In some institutions, I really love those institutions that really continue focusing on photochemical preservation, which is making new prints or new interpositives or fine grains from things which are rare or unique. That's the only thing that exists. You want to make more copies. You want to make the best copies. But I think with the digital, I'll give an example, a very specific example that ties back to the Lost Picture Show. So for you and I's, one of our favorites, Violated, that came from LOC. But the first time it came in, someone misplaced the drive. So where did it go? There are 3 people who kind of would have gotten it. We didn't know where it was. It's a tiny little thing, a couple terabytes or something, or like on that drive. It's a tiny little thing, very compressed, or not compressed, but very like small. So we had to get the scan again. The second time, while coming from Culpeper to beautiful Bridgeport, Connecticut, it failed. The actual drive shut down, and we weren't able to pull anything from that drive. But then the third time, which was probably a long, long time later, maybe 8 months or 6 months or something like that, they didn't have the file anymore, and they could rescan the film. So they rescanned the film, sent us the file again, and that's truthfully just because of the fact that the film still is there. And the truth about digital files is it's not a digital preservation unless it's the digital file is dealt with as an archival object in and of itself, where basically what Lindsay does, our great digital asset manager who also manages the database, is puts it on LTOs, which are linear tape open reel, basically, where you have multiple copies you have one, and then you have another of the same thing, and you don't touch them. You have to migrate them every few years, but that's literally digital, but it's on a physical form. And I think the goal is to have as many copies that are not like solid state drives, like the ones which were sent to us from LRC. And that wasn't even their fault. That was like because of the fact that so much goes in and out. Where basically, if we have a film reel, we catalog it. That's going to be every single film, like every feature film, is going to take before it gets to the scanner. Is probably going to take like 3 to 6 hours of like actual work to make sure it's going to the scanner and everything like that. And that means that extra work, that added attention, means that we're going to care for it a tiny bit more. And it's not just going to fail because of actual technological imperfections or anything like that. So I'm like the digital side of things are very, you don't know how they're going to fail. But I think there's something to be said about knowing where the monster is in the house. You know, if you know that the monster is in the same room and you can watch it, we know what the monster is with film. The monster with film is that it's going to deteriorate over time. With a solid state drive or an LTO, it's going to be either randomly failing because of temperature, humidity, being shaken, being bashed against the floor because it's small, being lost, or it's just because of obsolescence because you have to do two above. So we don't know what it's going to be. So it's good to know exactly what the issue is. That's why film is awesome. I know that's such a stupid conclusion, but it literally is like a really stable, cool material if you put the work into doing it the right way, I think.
Yeah.
So,
you know, I also think that there's and that was a really great answer, by the way. Like, I think that younger people like me or people who just grew up on the internet and everything, like probably have an idea about digital stuff and its permanence that is perhaps not properly calibrated. Like stuff disappears and like, you know, torrents fail and like all this other stuff. Like it might be out there somewhere, but it might not be as accessible as we'd like it to be, you know? And I think what's another thing worth considering is that like a digital file is infinitely like replicable, which is an advantage, but it also makes it such that if it is lost, like it can be created again, you know what I mean? Like, but an OCN or an interpositive or even the last surviving work print or whatever, like those are all irreplaceable things. Like they're the only one of that, you know? And so, and I don't know, you know, I was thinking like when I was watching the doc, the guy from Kino Lorber, I'm sorry that I don't remember his name. He was talking about how he wanted to get the driver safety videos, and the place that had them were like, well, we made videotapes of them, so we threw away the negatives. Like, why would we need that? And I felt a little bit like that person asking you that question, because it does kind of feel like we've reached perhaps the ceiling of like how good we can replicate these materials in like non-film mediums. But you know, I hope that in 50 years we don't look back and be like, well, we had the 4K file and it looks fucking sick, and not knowing what was in the future, you know?
Yeah, and a 4K file is great. Like you can see so much of the film, you know? I was just talking to someone who was going off of your Brentwood at Kino as an example, which I thought was like the perfect example to explain it, where it's like, what if 4K UHD, we can gain more insight into the film. Like you can blow it up to billboard size, and that's something which everybody needs in their home media. I hope that doesn't happen, but I think like, for instance, he was telling me, his name is Caleb, he works at the Major League Hall of Fame, and he was telling me about home movie footage, showed some home movie footage from the 1930s of Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig. I'm not a baseball person, but those are names that I know. And he
Those are
showed
names that
this.
I know. Just saying.
I know. Yeah. And like, but then he showed me this beautiful footage of them going to Japan in the 1930s, like right before World War II. And at the end of it, he said something which was like, so these were digitized in the 1980s to digital Betacam. The film is still in existence. But we're showing you the digital Betacam because that's what was cheaper to show you today. But like my dream is that we can make such a better file of those home movies now. And sometimes there's an odd barrier. Not that, like, you did a really great job by saying, being totally straightforward, this is not the best release that it could possibly be, showing it to a big audience. But I think there's a real value in ensuring, like, I really think it's really important to say to distributors when you do use the interpositive or a work print or a print, how do you prove that that is the last element? Because like we look through every nook and cranny for one reel of film which is missing from an OCN or an interpositive or something. And oftentimes many versions were released on VHS. It's not knocking anybody who releases things on VHS, but it's really, really important to ensure that for preservation quality, if you care about the longevity of what you're buying, make sure that you're like supporting the people who put that extra oomph into trying to find the best materials. It's really important for like anything which is being released nowadays, because like I want to see that 8mm footage like totally crisp and clear, and not with digital what's it called, digital interlacing and like all these other issues which could possibly be baked into the actual tape and transfer itself. We can get a layer beyond. But yeah, that was the perfect example, I think, with Brentwood's example of the traffic safety movies, because that's really sad to me, to have the original and then throw it away just because you had an more easily accessible copy that fits nicely on a shelf. That's important, but let's make sure that the people we're supporting and buying things from are also doing the exact same. But yeah, I think about that all the time. Yeah, his example is really, really good.
So my last kind of big question, and then, I think that'll be it in terms of like the big questions, and then we can maybe cover some odds and ends. But the whole time I was going through this set, the biggest question I think I had is like, so when you're doing a typical Blu-ray release or a typical restoration of any film, there are, like, you can watch it somewhere, and you have a point of reference to know what it is supposed to look like from start to finish. But with a lost film that, nobody has seen since like the 60s, or nobody has seen at all, or like you cannot reference at all, like, how do you know with a reasonable degree of certainty that one, you have the whole thing, like, two, it's in the right aspect ratio, three, there's no censorship going on that, we might have been unaware of, and so we're actually looking at an incomplete cut. Yeah, and especially something as like maybe subjective as color timing feels like almost an impossible task for like something that you don't have a point of reference to. And so I'm curious what sort of detective work went into making sure that with reasonable certainty this is the entire film as it was intended to be shown.
Yeah. So I think, like, put very basically, I think with a lot of these movies, we're dealing with the original materials, and I think you can kind of tell when something has been tampered with, if it's a later generational thing, which has kind of been messed with. You can see oftentimes print through the soundtracks. It's difficult to explain. But like with the original, if we have the original cut element, like we did for Beware the Black Widow and Beware the Black Widow and the What's Love? Yeah, it was the 80s. But we could tell that it wasn't tampered just because of the fact that like there were other video versions. Like we get everything if we get the OCN. Like we also had, I believe there was a 16 print of Beware, and there was a 1-inch video master for What's Love. But interestingly enough, the video master was shortened. So basically in the digital era, they could even remove sections of it. So that's why it also becomes a really tricky thing when you're like saying, oh, but like this looks different than my VHS. The VHS happened after the film, like there was the film first and then there's the VHS. But Otherwise, I think there are people who reviewed movies back in the day, and they usually say like, this movie was 78 minutes. Like people went in because they were watching movies that no one's ever seen. There are cinephiles from every like time zone for every genre, and there are people who basically said this was 78 minutes. This was 84 minutes, because they want to be the first person to report on that type of information. So they're newspaper articles and reviews and this kind of stuff. For Red Midnight, like, I think the shocking thing with that one is that like there was the more we dug, the more we came up with more and more information. Like Dino, who works in the archive, the store in Bridgeport, basically he's like a record and music expert, everything expert, really amazing person. But after hearing about the name for the first time, he went into a long spiral looking into every single one of the musicians who played in it. This is before we scanned it. And he's like, so this song contains songs from this band, and this solo singer or something. And that was before we'd even scanned it. And once we actually put it on the scanner, we're like, how did you know that? But that's why film's really interesting. It's because of the fact that it's music, it's acting, it's film, it's theater people. Oftentimes, we have a film that was recently found, which Christopher Lloyd lists as one of his, I believe, his first movie. It's an unfinished movie. And basically, somewhere on the internet, at some point in his career, I think he or his press agent listed that movie as something which he had completed. It's a movie which was never completed, but it was still listed somewhere in some listing and because he got famous, automatically, now we're able to look that movie up, and that's the only thing that comes up. Where basically you can see Christopher Lloyd was in this 1978 movie that no one's seen because it was never finished. You can find out so much just by knowing, like, even just the title. And when you have more information, like a few actors, you can find out almost close to everything. With grading, it gets really tricky. With grading, it gets really, really tricky. You go to like the earliest surviving element, earliest surviving tape, earliest surviving print, and then you have to extrapolate, because it's fairly, if it was in good condition, you can kind of know what the natural grading was for that print. But you shouldn't necessarily consider the print also the best guide either, because there were multiple prints done, multiple iterations. It's really complicated, and to be perfectly honest, like, very out of my area, because I would do certain things which sometimes I think like educated guesses. But that's why we have really great color timers who work on our films who like know this stuff way better than me. Because I would probably grade things and they would look really shitty, to be perfectly honest. And I just follow everything and spend way too much time trying to figure out the earliest version, which is a cost expenditure and a time expenditure too. When these movies have very strict schedules and time frames. But we always try to go back to the earliest possible version and try to use that as like a blueprint for the end result. Because this shit is really complicated. But then it's just so complicated. Yeah. But follow the film and find the earliest version. And you can kind of find runtimes and this kind of information with firsthand sources or any connecting sources which were tied to the film usually.
Well, shout out to libraries and library archives for keeping alive primary sources and newspaper articles and all this other stuff that I don't know that whatever Joe Schmo at the Philadelphia Sun or whatever thought that listing the runtime on Red Midnight would become useful to some scrappy restorationist fucking 50 years later. But it's the importance of archiving in general, right? You don't know what is going to be pertinent or useful information in a few generations' time.
Yeah, and I think it's also like a call to agency for people to collect films and to find rare video materials too today. Like, you don't have to work at an institution like Vinegar Syndrome or Library of Congress or Academy. A lot of these things were found by people who are private collectors. You can
Right.
do that. And like, I think anybody has the ability to find really cool shit, make a case for it, and be the first advocate for someone's favorite movie in 50 years. Because that's like, I think that's really important. Like, because most of the things that I advocate for, I'm just gonna keep like, I'm just gonna make sure that they have the deluxe treatment in the archive anyway. But yeah, I think it's really important to like find information about films that other people don't know about, and be the expert on your type of film that you find. You know, be a little Midasy. You know,
Mm-hmm.
like think what you touch is gold. You know,
Yeah.
regardless of whether it's gold yet.
Scour your Goodwill
Mhm.
film stock section. I know that people find those and all sorts of things.
Yeah,
You know, you never know what you could find.
yeah.
As it kind of related to that, I'm curious, not to beat up on these two films in particular, but like, let's say Sex Serum of Dr. Blake or Rare Blue Apes. You know, what we have is not ideal in terms of the material that was able to be used. Of course, it's better than nothing, and of course, and like honestly, I think it looks kind of miraculously good considering what it probably started as. But I'm curious, when you're putting together a box set like this, you know, if you find the OCN and it's in good condition, that's an obvious, like, slam dunk winner. Like, you don't need to keep looking after that. But if all we have is like a theatrical print with 2 subtitle tracks burned in, I'm curious at
Mm.
what point you say that's probably the best we're gonna get, or if it's kind of just like, if there's an element that might be closer to like, we're just gonna keep looking until we find something better, you know? I guess
Mhm.
concisely, when do we call it? When do we say, okay, this lost film has been found in suboptimal conditions, but enough to
Mhm.
just finally get this thing out there, you know? And
Mm.
I'm curious, like, as a follow-up to that, if for whatever reason somehow the original camera negative for Sex Serum shows up, this might not be a question you're able to answer. But is that the sort of
Mm.
thing where we get a replacement disc program in, or like you want to do a standalone
Mm.
release of it? It's like, hey, we found the best version of it. I
Mm.
don't know. These are things I think about. I'm curious.
No, I think about that too. I think one of the things that I really, really, when we first started releasing UHDs of things, like doing UHDs of things which were mostly on standard editions, I think there was this question about like, isn't this like if we already have a 4K file? But then I realized that the films were being scanned again. You know, they were being redone with our scanner, which is now much better at getting more information out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Everything was being redone. Like it's not just a cash grab or anything. Oftentimes, a lot of the things that we've done 4K UHDs for, or plan to do new 4K UHDs for, are because we had one element a long time ago, and now we were able to keep digging. Like we keep trying to find better elements. Something happened where earlier last year where we released something from a print. There are a few prints of it, but we thought that was like what you said, like that's the last version of it. About a month afterwards, we were able to find a CRI for that thing. So now we are able to like create a better version of that, but it happened like a month after it, and it kind of came to us because of the fact that someone was like, you released it from a print. This exists here in some unscoured area of the world,
Yeah.
or unscoured collection, and we
The
just
increased
didn't know what to
visibility
talk.
there kind
Yeah,
of
increased visibility.
ironically creates a problem
Yeah,
and a
but it's
solution,
also
you know?
good. It's a
Yeah.
solution. Yeah, I think it's good. I think it's a major bummer. It was a not so bad print. Like it had pretty good color, but the CRI, like you could make a beautiful UHD of this movie, and it would like you know, but like and so that one is coming sometime soon, and that's
Okay,
what's
that was
gonna
going to
have
be
to
my next
happen.
question.
I'm not gonna say what it is, but
Yeah, you don't, I
it's a
wasn't
very
gonna
good
ask,
one.
but I was
Yeah.
curious, like, in that situation, is it like, sick, now we can do it again, then like even better? Or like, is it like, it's been out, people are gonna complain that we're re-releasing, you know? Because I think a lot of people don't
Yeah.
even look far enough to know why it's being done, and they're just like, oh, this again? Come on. do something new.
Yeah.
It's just, the peanut gallery or whatever, but
Totally. I mean, no, totally. I mean, even like the opposite happens too, where one of my favorite films, and this is a story that I always like, I don't think I've talked about this one, but one of my favorite movies, one of my favorite Vinegar Syndrome movies is A Labor of Love. Um, uh, Beautiful, beautiful documentary about someone trying to make a movie, and it turns into a hardcore movie, and there's beautiful, like amazing comedic moments. And strangely comedic moments. It like really, really great movie. And
sounds like the hardcore version of American Movie or something. I've not seen it, so I'm
yeah,
just guessing,
yeah,
but that's what that reminds me of.
it feels like a mockumentary. It definitely
Mm.
feels like a mockumentary where it's like it's the characters are so funny, and they picked everyone's right, perfect for this documentary, but wrong for the actual movie that they're trying to make in the movie.
Hmm.
Like everything goes wrong. And but we had the original cut element, but someone else owned it, and we sent it away. Um, and that was done when we had a different scanner, which wasn't as good as the one we have now. Um, but we sent it away, and then that person passed away. That was an unowned material. That's their right. That's their materials. You can't just automatically just grab that and put it in our archive. That goes back to them. When they passed away, the materials were probably thrown out by the family members or the people who owned it. Um, and it's not even their fault. They thought it was done. They thought it was on Blu-ray. That's not their fault. That's kind of our fault for not explaining the whole issue. And now all we have is like a reversal print for this movie. This really, really great movie. And that's the opposite, where maybe we could do, would a UHD really work if it's from a 16 print versus like going from the original elements? I don't know. So it's the opposite too, where sometimes it happens where things get lost after the whole process of digitization. But
Mm.
yeah, things get lost. It always happens. It's very sad.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that story made me sad, but it is what it is, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. You got to kind of like live and let live, because there's so many movies out there too, and we still have a print. We still have one copy of it, so it's still pretty good.
So I'm gonna do some like quick rapid fire questions just to wrap this up, because I don't even know how long this conversation is gonna be in total, but I'm kind of astonished at the generosity of your time here. But I think it has all been very fascinating, and I think people get a lot out of this. But could you speak to sort of like the changing roles of like physical media in this sort of like film distribution, film archive space, and also to kind of tell us how we can tell that we're supporting like preservation first type Blu-ray releases?
Mhm. Yeah. Well, I definitely think I've been thinking about it recently because of the fact that a lot of early movies, I started getting into um, kind of studying archiving because I got interested in very, very early movies like Edison stuff, and a lot of
Mm.
I believe it's a lot of the Millier stuff is mostly gone, um, but a lot of the Edison stuff is gone too. And he was one of the first people, but a lot of it survives as well, where basically it was because of the fact that there are multiple copies, and even those were given out. That was the first physical media. It was prints of these types of movies, which were given away or rented for like $10 or something like that back in the day, which is a lot of money. But it's because of those prints now that things like keep going. But I think with regards to what we were talking about earlier with like the VHS copies, I I think like the really important thing is like I do think it's really important to continuously ask that question, which is like how is my purchasing of this or my support of this going to affect the next generation of things that we have many copies of. I think what I'm very proud of is my lasting impact, probably over the course of the next 100 years, is that we're like making sure porn survives. Uh, be scared of that, people, people, people in the future. I think that's it's good to make sure that you're like trying to support things which are just like not often seen as like super important. Everybody really loves studio titles here too, but it's also just like support some of the things which are like really low budget and like things that you wouldn't know whether or not you're going to like, because those are unproven entities. They're like, and if a lot of things survive, like you said already, just because of the fact that uh, some video master was made a long time ago for distribution. So that genuinely does help. But I think, and it'll continue changing. I think what you also brought up as well was like, why are we keeping these things for the future too? Which is like, I I don't think that we're ever going to be able to step in the film. We're never going to be able to like walk into the film and see like the 3D anything, even though I love to pretend that we are. But I do think that there's slight tweaks in terms of digital technologies that continuously get better. The question is often asked: is 4K UHD Blu-ray the best? Is going to be the end? Like that's the best physical media ever. And I think like for now, it's the best possible home media format for access. You can have the best version of the film. You can actually see the grain structure, and in a very uncompressed. I mean, still compressed, but it's like you can see the actual way the film is. And the fact that we're able to see that on a modern format and not just see the actual, it's amazing that we're able to actually see the film instead of just seeing the limitations of like the home media format of VHS, or like a 16mm print was an access format. And those were notorious because they would be cut down as well. People would get one reel of The Birds or some other mainstream studio thing. And you'd very rarely see the complete movie if you were like born at that time when that was the home media format of the time. But now we're living at this really amazing time where I think you can get so much closer to the film. And I think that is like, in my end, that's kind of the mantra where I always kind of try to think about it. It's whether or not we think we're close to the film. Like when you watch something, you like should be a little bit closer to the OCN or the inner positive or whatever element is used. So yeah, I don't know if that was the perfect way of answering the question, but I think it's something like about whether or not we can continue just saying, is this the final version? I think for now we should treat it as the final version, just because we're literally able to see so much of the film. That's really important. The end should begin at the beginning, and the beginning is the film. For many of these things, not on shot on video stuff, which is also fucking sick as hell. But yeah.
Yeah, I think until we get to like, I know that there's some kind of really expensive like format or TV or something where you can actually access like uncompressed files to like play directly. I guess that would be the next step, but like that's beyond something else. Like you're not going to be able to fit that on a disc. Like, you know what I mean? Like in terms of this sort of thing, I do feel confident in telling people 8K isn't coming. That doesn't really make a lot of sense. But like, another thing that I think people forget about is like, yeah, if you get a disc and you buy it, like that helps support the company, you get it and then you have it forever. Like people love to talk about all these reasons why physical media is really cool and everything. And I think that those are all valid. But, another piece that I don't know that people consider is that like these restorations cost a lot of money. And if you don't have the theatrical version, like, typically when people make a movie and they expect a return on their investment, it is like the theatrical window is kind of how the primary way now that people make their money back. But when you're kind of re-releasing an older film and a really obscure one at that, and you are putting a lot of capital and a lot of resources into it, like the Blu-ray is kind of your like theatrical distribution, where like that's how you pay for it and like make sure that it can happen again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think some people don't really think of it that way, but yeah, it's really important. You know?
Agree. I agree with you. I agree with you. I mean, like, I don't know. Everybody has their different favorite releases. Like a lot of my favorite releases are things that other people did, you know, like other companies even besides Vinegar, where it's like I really like it when people do things which they just do because it's cool to do, like having like multiple films from the same filmmaker, and most people have never heard of the filmmaker. You know, that's like a comprehensive thing. It's a really difficult thing to sell because automatically it balloons the cost of the release. But those are somewhat ironically, like those are the most important releases to really do, where it's like if you do something super ambitious, you're probably gonna like it's very difficult to get money back in this type of industry, but it's because of the whole package. It's because the people put like extra effort. You can tell when something has that extra effort. Like I think that's why I am proud of a lot of the releases, because of the fact that, you know, there's so many people working on each of the different releases, and there's no single one person at this company who deserves credit for it. Every single person does a tiny little bit, and it's like multiple one like 0.91% that actually 2% that actually adds up to that whole completed package. So that's why I really like film releasing, and some on my more positive days, I really like film releasing because it's really just a method of like working with together, like other people who care about movies. It's like no one's gonna have the final say. It's largely gonna be committee. If one person like was able to just do whatever they wanted, it would be kind of like it would be a dictatorship. So I don't know. Yeah, I agree with you there.
Last question. Well, my last two questions, just some fun ones, just to wrap up our conversation here. First one, what are some favorite or like unique or like really cool pieces that are in the archive collection that you have that you'd like to kind of brag about? And are there plans in the works for a volume 2 of the Lost Picture Show set?
All right. Yeah, so my favorite, so some of my they're weird oddities. From in the Against the Grain documentary, you see that we go to this lab, which is WRS, which is the Pittsburgh lab that George Romero did his process most of his materials at. And one of my favorite things that I like to talk about is on one of the boxes that was really disgusting is I saw NOTLD written on the box, opened it up, and it's not the picture, but it's the original like mag sections for like the crickets and the sound of the wind through the graveyard and the gunshots, and then the track neg, the 16 track neg. And I think that was like, you know, we're probably not going to put that movie out. But if anyone ever does a renewed restoration, MoMA did a great restoration where they redid the soundtrack, they can come to us. But something that I just found today is a roll of slide film. And this is not one of my favorites, but when like you brought it up, like this, I don't know if I can say this even on the thing, but it's there. I found a piece of slide film which is for a 1977 hardcore movie, all male hardcore movie, which has a song in it titled 1 Inch Penis Blues by Bill Schneiderman. And I've never ever, I mean, like, I need to hear the song now, you know, because I just found it on a piece of print. So that now has become one of my favorite things. It even says the guitar written by Dana Dana Calderman or something like that. But some other fun oddities I think that are in the film archive are there's so many weird things. Like let's see. We just have so many lost films too, where basically lost things which are sexploitation usually. Like one of my favorites is a 60s sexploitation which has stewardesses. It's about stewardesses in the late 60s, but it's like the print is so badly beaten up that I don't think it's even going to go through a scanner. So I have to like piece it together. Yeah, it's one of the probably the grossest print, which is infuriating because it's a lost exploitation movie. But yeah, there's so many cool things. So segueing into the volume 2, I dream of it. I dream of having a volume 2 for the Lost Picture Show. Mainly because of the fact that we keep finding cool stuff, and we keep finding cool feature-length stuff. Like in my dream scenario, in terms of cool lost films that could be included, but no promises, are like a Japanese alien movie from the late 50s.
That sounds sick as fuck.
Yeah. Lost alien movie. Nuyorican 1970s movie. Long lost. Beautiful color. What else could there be? A Texas-based children's movie featuring a whimsical female lead. There could be really cool things.
Rare blue apes down south.
Yeah, exactly. I know. Now we have to set the precedent. We have to do like another kids movie, which is just directed by
I love weird kids movies. I think they're a lot of fun.
Oh yeah. But there's so many different things where we come across it. I also want to do more shorts.
Yeah.
I feel like we have so many shorts here, and it's just about we're feature film based. But sure. I think if we expand it into shorts, we have so many weird little things. But it's just
shorts are tough to sell on their own, of course. But I think that if you guys wanted to put an emphasis on just kind of tacking those on to releases where they might make sense, or doing compilations. I know that those that Canadian International Pictures just did one that sold really well. I'm a big proponent of short films. I love short films, so I would certainly be in favor of that. I think our call to action is to buy this set and send the message that we want another one.
Buy it so there's a 2.
Cool.
Yeah, buy it. Yeah, I'll say that to everybody. I'll say that you said it was cool. I don't think it was pretty good. I think
it's my favorite release of the year. I don't know if I said that yet, but it is my favorite release that came out last year.
That's very nice to hear. Just so it was such a, to be perfectly honest, now after having seen it, I do get a little bit every single time I see it, because of all the the laden I don't know, suppressed trauma from all of the movies. Is this one going to be on? And it kept switching. But there is so many different little, this one's in, this one's out, this one's in, this one's out, So now after finally seeing it, and now actually being able to kind of get people's responses to it, and hearing that it's your favorite release of last year, this is very cool. That's very nice to hear.
I'm not just saying that because you're sitting in front of me. I'm saying that I believe I said that in my review that is up now. And I think I said it during Shelf Shock too. I'm not sure, but it's been on record previously. So
okay. Fuck yeah.
All right, we've hit another hour, which is just astounding to me. Not that we managed to talk this long, because I could keep talking to you all day, I think, but just that you presumably are a busy person with a real job, and so I am eternally grateful to you for your candidness and for your time and for your patience with the just inordinate amount of technical difficulties we had this time around. I guess so, just to wrap it up, where can people find you? What can people do to support the work that you do? And anything you want to plug at all, fire away.
Okay. Well, thank you again. Thank you again for having me. I think this was really, really fun. I genuinely enjoyed the conversation. All of your questions were some of my, like, you got to so many questions I've never been asked, and they were really, really nice, and really, I enjoyed being able to just discuss and chat and thank you so much.
Of course.
You can't find me on anything online because I'm bad. I don't have Twitter or Instagram. I have Facebook, which is that's the only thing that I have.
We probably shouldn't have Twitter anymore regardless, so that's good.
Yeah. Social media is very scary to me. I'm a very analog person, and I am bad with digital things. So I also appreciate all the technical that you do, like walking me through the technical side of the digital realm today too, where, because that stuff scares me as well. But I think, if anything, I feel like I should probably say, support releases and stuff like that from us and other companies. And we do cool stuff sometimes. And we do, everything is really cool and has an enormous amount of effort, and everybody puts a lot of really cool work into it. I think support the smaller things that you didn't believe would ever be on some kind of physical media form, especially things which are sexploitation, hardcore, shot on, even if it's just like some shot on video thing which you'd never even think warrants the deluxe Blu-ray treatment. Support that. Yeah, support little things in addition to the big releases that we all want to buy. I think it's pretty good. Go to Vinegar Syndrome, I guess. I don't like doing plugs. I like having not selling things, but I genuinely do think it really does support us, and it keeps the ACs on to support buying our Blu-rays, and we put so much work into them. And also the more people support us, the closer I can get to my dream of bringing us down below 55 degrees. And that's make it a poor little archivist dream come true, please. Yeah.
The 55-degree stretch.
Yes, we're almost there. We're so close.
I happen to have in front of me this release of Santet 1 and 2, which I think is a perfect example of the kind of under the radar weirdo stuff that people might not think to support, but these movies are really cool. I haven't reviewed them yet, but I do really like them. They're like Indonesian fucking black magic gonzo shit. Try to find some weird shit on the site and take a chance on it, I think, is my call to action.
Totally. And there's one release that's coming in halfway. Is it halfway? Yeah, halfway. Which I did a featurette on, where I basically talk about how the movie films got to our actual archive and the process of restoring them. Yeah, which
I rewatched the interview you did with Ryan at Disconnected because I didn't want to repeat any of his questions. And you said that was in the works, and I was like, well, that's a great question, and I would love to get an update on that. So that's really encouraging to hear, because I think that's super cool.
Ryan is credited as in the thing because he was the one who was talking to me about it while it was being made, and was somehow able to foresee that it was happening. I said I think his credit will be partially based on a completely original idea by Ryan Verrill. So go check that out. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you again. I really appreciated and enjoyed this conversation. Just to do my quick plugs at the end here. If you want to support this venture non-monetarily, liking the video, commenting lovely things for us to read, subscribing to the channel, and sharing it with somebody, all helps monumentally. If you'd like to support it monetarily, there are links in the description for my Patreon channel membership program, Amazon wishlist, and P.O. boxes in there too, should you like to send me something. maybe we should put Oscar's address in there so that you can send him fan mail via Pony Express, the most analog form of communication I can think of.
Yeah.
And with that, that's all. Remember that Satan loves all of their children. Bye. I'd like to take a moment to thank our newest patrons: Caroline, Karma Popo, Just the Discs, Lacey Silberman, Leona, Michael Hutchins, Nicholas, Noel, Paige, and Phil P. I'd also like to thank our accomplices: Anthony Listro, The Boogeyman's Closet, Carlin Cook, Deanna Vave, The Disconnected, Dustin Putman, George Strang, Julie Humphreys, Nosferatu 1334, Peppa Crab, Sasha Bobashasaurus, and Stephen Perkins. If you'd like to be counted amongst their ranks, the link is in the description.
Shipping gets better Wi-Fi in the film archive, and then the restoration section, which obviously has the best Wi-Fi. You know, there's no departmental strife here, but they definitely get the better restoration. What were we talking about before?
I had just asked you to tell us about the Lost Picture Show set.
Okay. I apologize. I have a gum addiction.